Chapter 1799. It gently hit one of the space-time mirrors. In the darkness, the red light spot was like a nuclear explosion. It emitted a dazzling light and suddenly exploded. The space-time mirror was disturbed and moved, rolling up a huge space-time turbulence. The power of the turbulence came crashing down. The system reached out and grabbed the red line, throwing it into the air. A huge space-time turbulence was like thousands of blades cutting towards the red line. More than half of the red line was broken in the rain of blades. The man sitting on the throne was originally drowsy, and the strength of pulling the red thread was just an instinctive action. He didn't use much strength, but when more than half of the red line was cut, he suddenly opened his eyes. White snowflakes pressed on his eyelashes and fell on his face. His expression became fierce and irritable. It was as if something important to him was going to be taken away. He pulled his wrist hard, and a strong force dragged the red line over. The system was originally avoiding the blades of the turbulence. In the end, it was dragged over. It hugged Wei Wei Bai's soul light ball and was about to fly into Yi Yuxuan's soul consciousness world. The red line snapped. It was all broken. The system immediately rolled through countless turbulence attacks and ran desperately to the door of reality. It plunged into the door and finally returned to reality. The man on the throne looked at the red line in his hand strangely. Strange, what was he going to pull? His mind was blank, and his heart was empty. He felt like he had lost something very important. What was it? He slowly closed his eyes again. His golden eyes were as deep as the abyss, calm and indifferent, without joy or sorrow. Snowflakes and hurricanes filled his world with white. Red blood continued to flow at the foot of his mountain. In reality, Yi Yuxuan suddenly opened his eyes. His heart was in severe pain, and his limbs seemed to have been hit by a heavy blow. Because of the excessive pain, he twitched. He got up from the sofa, bent his body in pain, and reached out to look. Sure enough, the red line was broken. He dreamed that something had cut the red line. It completely broke his marriage with Wei Wei Bai. It turned out to be true. Was it so painful to sever the red string? When Yi Yuxuan thought of Wei Wei Bai, he staggered up from the sofa. Just now, he had gone to deal with some trivial matters. In the end, he suddenly felt sleepy. Once he fell asleep, it was a long dream. The first half of the dream was very sweet. The latter half was filled with despair. He would never be able to win the love of a woman in his lifetime. Even the sweetness at the beginning was a lie, even if he already knew that she didn't love him. But this was the first time he knew this fact in his dream. One ironic fact: the pain of digging out one's heart and lungs, penetrating into one's bones and marrow, even if it was through a dream. He felt pain. Yi Yuxuan breathed heavily and quickly opened the door, only to see a white ball of light gently falling into her sleeping body. And what was hugging the ball of light was a pair of flawless white hands, a pair of children's hands. Yi Yuxuan didn't think much of it. He quickly rushed over, grabbed the hands tightly, and pulled them out. The system was already exhausted. It was anxious to return Wei Wei Bai's soul, afraid that a second later would cause problems. So when it saw that there was no one in the room, it didn't look around and put the soul into her body. Just as it put it down and was about to pull out its hand, Yi Yuxuan's hand grabbed its arm fiercely and dragged it out of the room. Chapter 1800. Drag, drag. Out. Go. Out. Ah. Yi Yuxuan was stunned. The person he was dragging was a child, floating in the air, a head of short red hair fluttering in the wind, a pair of red eyes that were as lively as fireworks, staring at him. It was him, only 7 or 8 years old. She was naked, and her skin was as white and tender as a peeled egg. Her face was round and cute, but her expression was particularly dull. System, this scene was a little awkward. This was a little unexpected. Yi Yuxuan finally said coldly, "You're a man." System was silent for a moment, then said, "I'm sorry too, haha." Was it that surprising that he was a man? Couldn't systems be men these days? Or did the male lead hope that he was neither a man nor a woman? No, the male lead should hope that he was a sexless person. It would be best if he wasn't even human. He wasn't actually human, but what could he do if he looked like this from the beginning? He was also in despair. Yi Yuxuan was very calm. Other than being a little surprised at the beginning, his emotions quickly stabilized. Who are you? What's your purpose? Where did you take her? System. Could he not answer? In the end, System said, I'm saving her. And if you're doing it for her good, don't tie a bunch of weird things to her, especially the red string. It'll kill her. It was a rare meeting. Hurry up and say it clearly. Next time, there would be a matter of stealing Wei Wei Bai's soul. He might not be able to handle it. The red string on Yi Yuxuan's wrist was still there, but it was broken. He looked at System calmly and was about to continue asking. Bai Weiwei's breathing became heavier. She reached out and covered her forehead with her hand in confusion. Her head hurt like hell. She didn't feel this way before. Was it the side effect of sleeping for too long? Yi Yuxuan was distracted, and System quickly broke free from him, plunging into a light spot on top of Wei Wei Bai's head. The specks of light immediately dissipated. He hid in the trash, to put on his clothes, but his clothes were all blown away by the space-time turbulence. This was the first time he had been dragged out, and he was still naked. Otherwise, Yi Yuxuan wouldn't have been able to tell that he was a man at first glance. He silently closed the trash can and refused to go out. This world was too scary. Yi Yuxuan did not care about the system anymore. He immediately reached out and gently massaged her temples with his fingers. Her headache subsided. When she opened her eyes, she saw Yi Yuxuan's indifferent face and the worry in his calm eyes. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but blink. Her voice was hoarse from sleeping for too long. Yi Yuxuan? Yi Yuxuan made a muffled sound and asked, Are you feeling better? Wei Wei Bai nodded. Only then did Yi Yuxuan release her temple. Then, he got up and poured her a cup of warm water. He held her in his arms and fed her. Wei Wei Bai wanted to reach out to take the water, but he was not willing. After drinking the water, Wei Wei Bai pushed him away with great effort, separating the two of them from their overly intimate position. She stood up and said, Where is this? This room was very similar to her room at home. All kinds of furnishings and decorations were fine. Even the paint on the walls was very light. This overly feminine and dreamy feeling. It did not seem like the style that Yi Yuxuan liked. His style was very cold, and the colors were all cold. Yi Yuxuan replied softly, My apartment, an apartment near the company. Wei Wei Bai was too lazy to ask how many apartments he had. The head of the Yi family didn't have much. He had a lot of money. Is at https://www. Sashu. Com the. Chapter 1801. Wei Wei Bai stretched her limbs. She had slept for too long, so her body felt much better. However, her body still felt numb. Yi Yuxuan was simply carrying out what he said last time. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw him. Wasn't he tired of taking care of a comatose person for so long? Yi Yuxuan didn't say anything. He only looked at her with a deep and strange gaze. His stare made everyone feel uncomfortable. Wei Wei Bai's brain was still muddled. A lifetime was too long. After so many times, she still couldn't get used to such a long time. That darned Yumaqian. His affection for her didn't drop at all. He maintained a good impression of her until she died. She felt that it was weird. Wei Wei Bai supported her head with her hands. She frowned and thought that perhaps Yumaqian was a little strange. Other men couldn't possibly be as loyal as him. She couldn't help but glance at Yi Yuxuan. This man's handsome face was still the same, and his expression was still cold and expressionless. After not seeing him for so long, she actually felt that he had become more handsome. Did his personality change again? She carefully probed. Where's my father? The only person she cared about was Bai Changyan. As for Bai Yaoyao, who was she? It had been too long. Ever since Bai Yaoyao fell and was seriously injured and taken away by the bodyguards. She didn't have the time to find trouble with her. She would wait until she was done with her strategy before settling the score with that B** starred. After going through so much, she felt that that B* starred was no longer important. Yi Yuxuan didn't answer. Instead, he remained silent for a long time before saying gently, Aren't you going to ask me? She had lived a lifetime, a very long time. Even in his dreams, he could feel the ravages of time. Every time she woke up, her gaze was lost and tired. However, when she woke up, her first reaction wasn't to ask him how he was doing. Instead, she asked her father. A faint jealousy appeared in his heart. It hurt a little. Perhaps it was this dream that reminded him of her cold and heartless gaze. That was why he started to feel bad. Moreover, his red string was broken. It was not easy to tie the string of marriage, but he had forcefully snatched away forever. Nothing else. No matter how determined Yi Yuxuan was, she couldn't help but feel bleak. This feeling was different from the intense pain he felt after she left in his dream. Instead, it was a more gentle but slow discomfort. Wei Wei Bai saw the melancholy in his eyes and frowned. Without thinking much, she reached out and touched the slight wrinkle between his eyebrows. What happened? Did the company close down? She was surprised to see such a melancholy expression on Yi Yuxuan's face. Could it be that something had happened? Yi Yuxuan didn't say anything. The warmth of her fingertips stayed on his forehead. He stared at her in silence before reaching out to hold her finger that was touching his forehead. He brought it to his lips and gently kissed it. The company isn't important. I just want to be the first person you ask when you wake up. That was all. Yi Yuxuan's personality was really fickle, but her sappy nature remained the same. She said helplessly, "Okay, how have you been recently?" After all, she still needed her life points. She couldn't just ignore him just because he gave it to her. Yi Yuxuan's eyes curved, and the calmness in his eyes turned into broken stars. "I'm doing well." Wei Wei Bai refused to listen to him. "I'm doing well because you've always been here." She immediately followed up, "I'm doing well. Everyone is doing well." Yi Yuxuan originally wanted to say the truth because you've always been here, but he forcefully swallowed it down. However, some of the melancholy in his eyes dissipated. Wei Wei Bai got off the bed. "I'm going to the bathroom." Wei Wei Bai felt like she had been lying down for a lifetime. She urgently needed a hot bath to prolong her life. When she left, Yi Yuxuan finally showed some signs of struggle on his face. Then he finally reached out and touched his wrist. He couldn't touch the red string. But when he said softly, "I won't tie you up anymore," if it would endanger her life, he didn't want to and didn't dare to tie her up. The red string seemed to know his wishes. It turned into red dust and dissipated in the air little by little. The red string on Wei Wei Bai's wrist also began to disappear. Wei Wei Bai, who was taking a bath, felt a little itchy on her wrist. She couldn't help but scratch it. Sure enough, she still had to take a bath. If she didn't take a bath, even her hands would itch. //save button the next time you open the bookshelf, you'll be able to see it. If you like, comma. Chapter 1802. After Wei Wei Bai finished showering and putting on her clothes, she carefully called the system. "Tongzi, has anything happened recently?" The system finally dared to appear and whispered, "Nothing. Your dad and Xinxiu are playing tennis and talking about life. Your company is flourishing under the care of the Yi family. Just sleep. I promise you nothing will happen." "Nothing? Why do you sound like a thief?" Wei Wei Bai said. "Yi Yuxuan is weird." The system said, "He's always weird. He's never normal." Since when was the male lead not weird? If he wasn't weird, wouldn't he become normal? A normal person would have no characteristics. He couldn't be the male lead. Perfect logic. Although Wei Wei Bai felt that the system made a lot of sense, she still felt that Yi Yuxuan was weird this time. It was that kind of disheartened feeling. This was also the first time she saw this kind of decadence in Yi Yuxuan. He had always been like a robot. His emotions were very well adjusted. His eyes were very sharp. His mouth was better than anyone. What was more terrifying was that his brain was like a computer, but it was better at reasoning than a computer. So no matter how much pain this kind of man was in, he would not feel decadent. Because he knew decadence was useless, he would abandon this kind of emotion. Successful people were successful like this. Wei Wei Bai could not describe his condition. She asked, "How's the health bar?" The system said, "No change." Wei Wei Bai, the system said, "There really is no change. When we came back from the previous plane, we went through a turbulence and accidentally damaged some things. So when you come back this time, you can't collect health bar." So her health bar could only be maintained at 5,500, right? Because she spent a few hundred health bar in the previous plane, after deducting it, she only had 5,200 left. But because she could get 5,500 health bar, just now, It had secretly helped her get 300 health bar. It was better than nothing. Wei Wei Bai said, "Wait, this works." She stayed in the plane for a lifetime, but her health bar did not change. The system replied, "That was an accident. It won't happen again in the next realm." Wei Wei Bai felt that she was about to become dispirited. He had worked for an entire plane for nothing. He was practically a slave laborer in Africa. The only thing he could get for working so hard was that he wouldn't starve to death. None of them could make a fortune. Guarding Yi Yuxuan and not being able to make a fortune, the main system was even worse than her. The system glanced at her clean wrist. Life points could not be expanded in this plane because the red string was broken. The tight connection between Yi Yuxuan and Wei Wei Bai suddenly broke apart. The intimacy between the two of them was damaged. He would be able to recover in the next plane. Hence, this time, Wei Wei Bai was unable to gain any HP. The system asked, "Are you leaving?" It was also afraid of Yi Yuxuan. It was best not to stay in the real world for too long. Who knew what other tricks Yi Yuxuan would come up with? She would tie another red string. Next time, he and Wei Wei Bai would have to visit Yi Yuxuan's lair as guests. Once a guest, they would never return. He was terrified of Yi Yuxuan's current state, not to mention that powerful body of strength that extended out of his soul. That was a master who could slash people with a knife without hesitation. Wei Wei Bai walked towards the bathroom door. "No, let's go see my dad first." Ever since Yi Yuxuan appeared, he has become an old man who has retired. Bai Changyan was a strong man in his 40s. Other than his crow's feet, he looked like an old, handsome man on the outside. At this age, he was obviously full of energy. In the end, he was raised by Yi Yuxuan into an old man who had retired. Chapter 1803. She didn't do her job every day and wasn't encouraged to date Air Chan. She just ran to play with Qin Xiao. Qin Xiao was also a director, right? Even the most expensive private hospital in the country didn't have as many patients as the public hospital, but he should be very busy. As a result, since he became her attending physician, he and her father both became retired fishermen. What do they do all day long? Fishing, gardening, playing golf, playing chess, eating KFC. They were all salted fish in advance. Nibbling on Yi Yuxuan, right? Well, she wasn't qualified to say. She also nibbled on Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan was really miserable. When she opened the door, her movements were relatively small. When she walked out silently, she saw Yi Yuxuan sitting on a chair, diagonally facing her. His beautiful eyes were half closed, the corners of his eyes slightly bent. His beautiful and calm eyes had a kind of gray coldness. His slender fingers were on the armrest, tapping casually, as if he was thinking about some difficult problem. With a bit of confusion, a bit of decadence. This man rarely sat so straight, as if he was crushed by something. There was a kind of fragile feeling that made one's heart ache. Even his eyes seemed to be dyed with fog. There was no usual sharpness, clarity, or coldness. Wei Wei Bai's footsteps paused, standing at the bathroom door and frowning at him. She found that he didn't notice her gaze. Normally, this man who was like a radar wouldn't be like this. "What's going on?" She couldn't help but ask the system. The system didn't say anything. These few planes, as long as Yi Yuxuan was there. The system didn't say anything. Wei Wei Bai knew that something must have gone wrong. She didn't know, but for the time being, she couldn't force the system. She couldn't force Yi Yuxuan. The days of being sandwiched in the middle and waiting to be eaten were really difficult. Wei Wei Bai slowly walked over step by step. Yi Yuxuan immediately raised her half-closed eyes. The confusion in her eyes disappeared, replaced by her usual calm and clear expression. He looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai in her pajamas. She was barefooted, and her fair face was flushed. She looked exceptionally beautiful. His eyes darkened, and his fingers that were tapping on the armrest also stopped. Wei Wei Bai walked behind the two-seater sofa where he was sitting. She put her hands on the back of the sofa and looked at him with a smile. "What's wrong? Are you in a bad mood?" Xian Xian. Xian Xian was a very cute name. She made it sound even cuter. Her lips and teeth were entwined with each other, and her voice rose at the end. Everyone who heard it felt that this name was really festive. It was even more intimate. As expected, Yi Yuxuan's frown dissipated a little. "I'm fine. Let's do a simple physical examination, and then I'll take you out for dinner. Her meals were specially prepared. Physical examinations were also carried out every day. If he woke up, he would have to do a checkup. Her body was getting better. It had always been getting better. In terms of medicine, this was a miracle. The doctor even said that in her case, her body could be repaired by sleeping. In fact, everyone knew that it was impossible for a person to sleep away a terminal illness. But it was Wei Wei Bai who was such a weirdo. This was also the reason why Bai Changyin had never been worried about her sleeping. After all, the originally fragile heart could be improved by sleeping. It could even be healed. That parents were unhappy and even hoped that Wei Wei Bai would sleep more. They would talk about it after she recovered. Wei Wei Bai finally understood that a man like Yi Yuxuan would hold the sky up even if it collapsed. He would still reply casually, "It's fine, nothing happened." Is at https://www.sashu.com//. Chapter 1804. Wei Wei Bai stared at him, scrutinizing him intently. But Yi Yuxuan was very natural and calm. Only his eyes softened, and he didn't show any more emotions. Well, compared with Yi Yuxuan, a 1,000-year-old robot, she was a bit worse, at least in terms of hiding emotions. She wasn't as good as him. Wei Wei Bai couldn't see anything, so she could only get up and say, "Okay, then I'll go see my dad." Yi Yuxuan didn't object. He had always indulged her. "Okay, I'll go with you." As long as she didn't get lost and stay by his side, he was easy to talk to. Wei Wei Bai had no idea of getting rid of Yi Yuxuan, because she couldn't get rid of him at all. After Wei Wei Bai checked her body and ate a special nutritious meal under Yi Yuxuan's supervision, he drove her to see Bai Changyin. Bai Changyin was playing tennis with Qin Xiu in the club. Recently, the company was very stable. The Bai family's business was very good. Plus, with Yi Yuxuan's words, no big company dared to squeeze the Bai family. As a result, Bai Changyin was basically waiting for the pie to fall from the sky. He didn't have to do anything, and the company grew by itself. He also wanted to do more things. But when Yi Yuxuan helped, his means were really not as good as this young man's. As long as the owner of the company was determined to be the Bai family, Bai Changyin was also happy to eat Yi Yuxuan's dividends. They were all family. His daughter had forced herself on him, so there must be an explanation. When they were playing tennis, the bosses of several companies came to say hello. They were all companies bigger than the Bai family. Before, it was Bai Changyin who went to say hello. Now the situation was reversed. Bai Changyin also knew that it was because of Yi Yuxuan. He smiled and exchanged greetings, sent them away, and saw Qin Xiu on the phone. It was the hospital. Qin Xiu had temporarily let the vice president hold the title of acting president and almost relieved himself of his responsibilities. Qin Xiu's main task now was to keep an eye on Wei Wei Bai's health. This was also the reason why Qin Xiu had always been with Yi Yuxuan. Of course, after soaking for a long time, they would get bored and go out to play with the even more bored Bai Changyin. As for playing with Yi Yuxuan, he didn't dare to think about it. If only Yi Yuxuan could come out to play like the two of them and drink the nourishing wolfberry tea. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. After Qin Xiu finished talking to the acting president, he ordered some important things in the hospital before hanging up the phone. Then, he and Bai Changyin sat on a chair to rest while the waiter served them drinks. Bai Changyin was Qin Cha. Qin Xiu was a meddler chrysanthemum. The two semi-retired old men were chatting. "The weather is so good. It would be great if Wei Wei could recover. I remember that when her heart disease was not so serious when she was young, she also liked tennis." Of course, he wouldn't allow Wei Wei Bai to do anything that was too intense. That was why Wei Wei Bai's tennis skills were terrible. Later on, when her body was not good, she couldn't do any sports. Qin Xiu drank the wolfberry chrysanthemum water. Wei Wei's physical condition is getting better day by day. I estimate that with her current heart condition, as long as there is no accident, she could be guaranteed to not have a heart attack for more than 10 years. Her heart was not completely healed, but it was already healthy. It was simply a miracle. Yi Yuxuan was originally a weirdo. With Wei Wei Bai, the two weirdos could be considered a match made in heaven. Bai Changyin was drinking tea when he suddenly saw a familiar figure appear in his peripheral vision. The distance was a bit far, so he couldn't see clearly and could only squint. That girl looked a bit like his family's Wei Wei. /to TXT. Download. Chapter 1805. Wei Wei Bai entered the club and went to the tennis court. When she saw the tennis racket, it brought back memories of her childhood. At that time, she had also touched a tennis racket for a period of time. Of course, it was just for fun and couldn't be said to have really played. With her weak body, any kind of sports could kill her. And now, she could still do some sports. She picked up a tennis racket and threw it to Yi Yuxuan. Do you know how to play tennis? Yi Yuxuan nodded. He had learned how to play golf and tennis when he was young. He just learned it as a mission. He didn't feel much about it. Wei Wei Bai picked up a tennis racket and a new tennis ball. Let's play tennis. Her father must be at this tennis court. But there were several tennis courts, and she couldn't see where he was at the moment. It was fine if they couldn't find him for the time being. They could just have a gathering after dinner tonight. Wei Wei Bai was wearing trousers and a long shirt. Because she was going to play tennis, she tied her hair into a high ponytail. Under the warm sunlight, her smiling appearance was very much like the dream girl of youth. She was indescribably charming. Yi Yuxuan was holding the tennis racket. He, who didn't have any feelings for tennis, suddenly felt a little moved. He held the racket and turned it casually. He was very calm and natural. It was a very simple action, but those who knew their stuff would know that he was very likely to have met an expert with such ease. Wei Wei Bai was eager to try and threw the ball into the air. Then, she jumped and hit it hard. Well, where was the ball? She fell to the ground blankly. She couldn't hit the ball with the racket, so she quickly looked up. Dong! The ball hit her squarely on the forehead. She immediately covered her forehead. Can this ball run? She had hit it in the same direction, so why didn't she see the ball? Yi Yuxuan, who was standing opposite her, then he walked over silently, took an ice towel from the waiter's plate, and covered her forehead. He asked in a low voice, Are you okay? Wei Wei. He saw that the force of the ball was not strong, so it should not cause any pain. But it was one thing to know rationally. Seeing her holding her head coquettishly, he felt that she was both cute and pitiful. Wei Wei Bai pushed him away and said fiercely, Nonsense, of course it's good. I don't believe that I can't hit the ball. When she started learning as a child, her teacher said that she was very talented. Wei Wei Bai waved her racket and took another ball. Then, he threw it up and swung it. He couldn't hit the ball. Wei Wei Bai displayed her tenacity and continued to serve. Every ball missed. Even if he didn't know how to fight, he wouldn't be so ridiculous. Yi Yuxuan looked at her calmly from the side. She looked especially energetic when she was sweating, so he didn't stop her from exercising. Wei Wei Bai threw the last ball to the ground and said, It must be the wrong ball. Yi Yuxuan was silent for a moment. Then, she casually took a ball and threw it up. A beautiful serve was neatly hit to the opposite side. It was very standard and perfect. This perfect service even made the spectating service staff applaud continuously. He lowered his head and said, There's no problem with the ball. Wei Wei Bai, she looked at him speechlessly for a while. Suddenly, she grabbed a ball and rushed to the net. Then, she put the ball on the racket and gently extended the racket to the opposite side. The racket was slanted. The ball landed. Okay, she finally hit the ball over the net. Then, she took the racket and looked back at Yi Yuxuan provocatively. You're the only one who knows how to serve. Yi Yuxuan looked at her shameless look. Her eyes were bright and sly, and there was a smile in them. As if he was infected, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curve upwards, and a smile appeared. Even his calm and cold eyes were slowly filled with gentleness and smiles. Wei Wei Bai saw him smile and said, I finally made you smile. I didn't pretend to be stupid in vain. Yi Yuxuan didn't realize that he was smiling. He couldn't help but reach out and touch the corner of his mouth. Then, he thought of something and looked up at her. You missed the ball on purpose to make me laugh. Wei Wei Bai laughed and snorted. Otherwise, do you think my tennis skills are really that bad? I just saw that you were in a bad mood and wanted to make you happy. Yi Yuxuan couldn't explain how he felt at that moment. His hand that was covering his mouth tightened. He couldn't help but purse his lips. Maybe it was because he was touched, but more because he saw the worry hidden under the genuine smile in her eyes. His lips curled up again. This time, he really couldn't help but laugh. Seems like Wei Wei plays tennis very well, he said with a soft laugh. Wei Wei Bai saw that this man was so handsome that it was unreasonable. Her face heated up, and she immediately grabbed the ball. Of course, I'm definitely good at tennis. With that said, she threw the ball up. In the sunlight, she swung the racket beautifully, dong. The ball hit her head. She swung the racket, but missed again. Wei Wei Bai, Yi Yuxuan's system, that was a slap to the face. Dong, 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 dong. / to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click save at the bottom to record this reading. Comma. Chapter 1806. Wei Wei Bai felt that her old face, if she still had a face, was trampled on the ground by this ball. She wanted to be calm, but she was hit in the face by the ball. Her fingers were stiff, and she wanted to put down the racket. This body had not exercised for a long time. She had no motor nerves. So it was her fault for not exercising for too long. It was definitely not that she had no talent for sports. Yi Yuxuan reached out to hold her hand and lifted the racket in her hand. Then he stood behind her and corrected her posture with the other hand. Your posture is not standard. It's easy to hurt yourself like this. Do it with me. The two of them were close together. When Yi Yuxuan lowered his head to correct her posture, his cheek was against her hair and his breath was intertwined with hers. He whispered softly, his voice was hoarse and low, and it was so magnetic that it made people's ears tingle. Wei Wei Bai wanted to reach out and touch her ear. It was itchy. She was an old hand, but without a shield, she couldn't resist Yi Yuxuan's gentleness and affection. To be honest, a man like Yi Yuxuan, as long as he softened, any woman would want to drool when she saw him. Bai Weiwei silently swallowed her saliva. How could you be so hopeless? Yi Yuxuan whispered in her ear. Do you understand? Try it. Weiwei Bai's ear was tickled by his voice. The ball in her hand fell from her hand before it could fly. Yi Yuxuan quickly reached out and took the ball back. Like a good teacher, he said to her, "It's okay to fail. You'll get used to it after a few more times. Your motor nerves are not developed because you're not familiar with it." In her physical condition, she slept most of the time. She didn't exercise much. Of course, she couldn't master this kind of exercise that required keen nerves. Weiwei Bai quickly reached out and touched her ear. She looked up and saw her father and Qin Xiu holding the wire of the tennis court next door, staring at them strangely. These two living people were looking at them with such passionate eyes. Bai Weiwei was terrified for a moment. She immediately broke free from Yi Yuxuan's hand, left his warm and seductive embrace, and ran to the barbed wire fence. "Dad," Bai Changyan immediately said, "Weiwei, you're awake. How are you feeling? I was planning to visit you tonight." He looked at his daughter as if he wanted to visit her in prison. Yi Yuxuan's jailer had even set a time limit. He couldn't even look at her for a few more minutes. He was afraid that he would disturb Weiwei Bai's rest. Weiwei Bai said, "He can already run and jump, so of course he's fine. He's just a little sleepy." Bai Changyan, sleeping is good. Every time you sleep, your body will feel much better. Qin Xiu came over. "I have all your medical reports. If you want to see how your body is doing, come to me." Bai Changyan reached out and slapped the guy who stole the spotlight away, like he was swatting a fly. Then he said to Weiwei Bai, "Weiwei, the company has been doing well recently. While you were sleeping, I worked hard to improve myself, just so that when you recover in the future, you can see the Bai family's company prosper. You've taken over a very perfect company. A retired old man who ate, drank, and played all day. How could he have the face to say such shameless words?" It was obviously Yi Yuxuan's credit. Weiwei Bai sighed. It turned out that her family had always had a shameless gene. She also didn't expose her old father who worked hard to improve himself. Just as she was about to say something, a cup of healthy wolfberry tea was handed over from the side. She looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan's delicate jaw and his thin lips. His expression didn't change, but his eyes were particularly deep. Tita. Chapter 1807. Drink some water. Weiwei Bai took it and drank 2 mouthfuls. The nourishing tea actually had a sweet taste. She realized that they were finally starting to mature. Adult beverages were all made with this stuff. In this society, nourishing one's health was very popular. Wei Wei Bai drank half of it and handed it to the service staff beside Yi Yuxuan. She said to Yi Yuxuan, "Are you thirsty? Do you want to order coffee or ice water?" Yi Yuxuan acted as if nothing had happened. He picked up the half cup of nourishing tea and drank it in a few mouthfuls. Because he drank a little too quickly, his Adam's apple trembled. It was indescribably sexy. Wei Wei Bai only felt a little hot, especially because Yi Yuxuan was sweating. A few drops of sweat slid down his neck and disappeared into the muscles under his clothes. She felt even hotter. How could there be a man who could drink goji berry water and make it feel like he was in a sexy movie? Yi Yuxuan was simply a walking male hormone machine. Wei Wei Bai silently took a few steps back, refusing to be seduced by him. Yi Yuxuan put down the empty cup and looked up at Bai Changyan. He called indifferently, "Father-in-law." Bai Changyan immediately responded, "Son-in-law." Bai Wei Wei indicated that these two people knew what the relationship was between the two of them. Father-in-law and son-in-law. Why did she marry Yi Yuxuan? Why didn't she know? Her old father was addicted to eating Yi Yuxuan and sold his daughter directly. Yi Yuxuan said indifferently, "Wei Wei said she wanted to come and see you." These words were said coldly. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. Her old father was also someone who had experienced the hardships of society. How could he not understand the emotions in Yi Yuxuan's eyes? What was wrong with a daughter coming to see her old father? Could it be that after you two got together, your daughter would be yours? Even her old father couldn't come and see her. When he grew old in the future, wouldn't he be a lonely old man? He was a poor old man with no daughter to visit him. At the thought of this, Bai Changyan immediately stopped and said to Wei Wei Bai, "Wei Wei, it's not good to always trouble others. Why don't you go home and stay?" He didn't even finish his sentence. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up, and she immediately nodded firmly. Okay, she had wanted to go home for a long time. It was Yi Yuxuan who took advantage of her vegetative state to carry her away. Yi Yuxuan gently placed his hand on Wei Wei Bai's shoulder and looked at Bai Changyan expressionlessly. There was no expression on his face, but his eyes were incomparably cold. It was so cold that it made people feel a little scared. Bai Changyan stared at Yi Yuxuan's murderous eyes and pretended to be calm as he said, "Then you'll come home with me later." After he finished speaking, he glared at Yi Yuxuan. He hadn't even become an official yet, but he was already planning to make his daughter not look at him. Unfilial son-in-law. He needed to be taught a lesson. Wei Wei Bai's tone was a little excited. "I'll go in your car later." If she continued to stay by Yi Yuxuan's side, she wouldn't be able to control herself. She was still self-aware. Now that she had crossed planes to hook up with others, it was still okay for her to be alone. She was clearly a scumbag. But if she was seduced by Yi Yuxuan and carelessly did something unforgivable to him, then, if she wanted to be a scumbag in the future, she would also be making Yi Yuxuan a cuckold. It was rare to find a good man, and he was also the benefactor who saved her life. Wei Wei Bai would also consider Yi Yuxuan's feelings. So before she had enough life points, she would definitely not be seduced by Yi Yuxuan. The way to definitely not make Yi Yuxuan a cuckold was to not sleep with him, not be his girlfriend, not be his fiancée or wife. Chapter 1808. This way, the two of them wouldn't be labeled as a couple and wouldn't be cuckolding him. Perfect logic. Wei Wei Bai thought happily and was about to walk to the tennis court next door to meet her old father. Yi Yuxuan suddenly patted Wei Wei Bai's shoulder. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks and was about to turn around with a smile to ask what was going on. One of his hands was already around her waist, and he easily lifted her up. His other hand was wrapped around her legs, and he lifted her onto his thick shoulders. Wei Wei Bai's entire body slammed into Yi Yuxuan's back. His body was well-trained, and his back muscles were so strong that it made her nose hurt. She covered her nose, and her hair fell down. She stared at the shaking ground and shouted, "Yi Yuxuan, what are you doing?" Yi Yuxuan's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were cold. His voice was steady and crisp. "Visiting hours are over. Let's go home." Wei Wei Bai grabbed his back clothes with both hands. "Stop, I want to go home." "Yi Yuxuan, I am your home." "Wei Wei Bai, you're not my father." "Yi Yuxuan, I don't mind if you want to call me father." Bai Changyan immediately rushed over from the tennis court next door. Wait, Yi Zizi, let my daughter go. Yi Yuxuan calmly turned around and said warmly, Father-in-law, do you like the scenery of the island? There are bikini beauties, wine, and beaches. Why don't I send you on a vacation tonight? Bai Changyan angrily rolled up his sleeves. You little brat, you're threatening your father-in-law. I'm not marrying my daughter. What can you do to me? Wei Wei Bai also immediately agreed. I'm not marrying you. I'm not marrying you. Yi Yuxuan was very calm. He said to Wei Wei Bai, it's okay. If you don't want to marry me, I can marry you. I'm not picky. When he said that he wasn't going to be picky, his eyes and expression were unusually cold and calm. It was as if this sentence was as simple as eating a mantis. Bai Changyan choked for a moment. Yi Yuxuan's words were too damaging. What kind of power could make Yi Yuxuan say that she wanted to marry Wei Wei Bai? No matter how much a man loved a woman, he would not say such words. Moreover, a man like Yi Yuxuan would take his words seriously. Yi Yuxuan took the entire Yi family and married into the Bai family. When Qin Xiu came over, he saw Yi Yuxuan carrying Wei Wei Bai away. Bai Changyan's eyes were as wide as copper bells, and his mouth was wide open. Qin Xiu didn't hear Yi Yuxuan's words just now. He thought that his Xian had provoked Bai Changyan again. Qin Xiu just said, In-law, my Xian is not sensible. Bai Changyan immediately smiled and said affectionately, No, I should be the one calling you in-law. In-law, I think your Xian is beautiful and capable. He's good at everything. He's a good match for my Wei Wei, who's unreliable. The Yi family married into the Bai family. His Bai family was going to be rich. Qin Xiu's face was full of question marks, and then he sighed that Yi Yuxuan was indeed worthy. He settled his father-in-law so quickly. The two in-laws continued to drink wolfberry health tea intimately. Wei Wei Bai slumped on Yi Yuxuan's shoulder. She was like a sack, being carried by Yi Yuxuan all the way for people to admire. Tomorrow, all the upper circles would know. Wei Wei Bai was carried away by Yi Yuxuan. All kinds of gossips would appear. Maybe the Bai family owed money and used their daughter to pay for the debt would appear. It was Wei Wei Bai's turn to be dispirited. How could she have such a strong robot like Yi Yuxuan? Wasn't it heavy to carry for so long? Collection below to record this reading record. Chapter 1809. Yi Yuxuan seemed to know what she was thinking and said, It's not heavy, you're too light. Wei Wei Bai said, Haha, wait till I eat more in the future. I'll give you 180 pounds of meat to crush you. Yi Yuxuan's gaze softened a little. Okay, I'll wait for you. This sentence was clearly a very normal conversation. Why to make her feel like her scalp was going to explode? Wei Wei Bai had no resistance to Yi Yuxuan's voice. When his voice was gentle, it was as though someone was holding a comb with a little electric current and was continuously combing her spine. Waves of numbness. Wei Wei Bai shivered and couldn't take it anymore. When Yi Yuxuan saw the car, he put her down and said to her, Don't run, wait for me. He took out the keys and pressed the control button. The car automatically slid out and opened the door. You get in first. He walked to the row of luxury cars and looked at them one by one. Then he stood in front of a car that Wei Wei Bai found familiar, but she couldn't recognize it. Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. What's going on? Could it be that Yi Yuxuan brought more than one car? Yi Yuxuan stretched out his finger and tapped on the car lid lightly. Then, with a flick of his finger, a thin and sharp knife poked out from under the keychain. He bent down and pierced the tire with the knife. The tire was so hard, but she didn't know what kind of monstrous strength he had. After piercing it like that, he slowly opened up a huge hole. He was just short of dismembering the tire. Wei Wei Bai looked at Yi Yuxuan's childish actions. She couldn't help but say to the system, Such a mature and cold person also has a hobby of piercing tires. The system finally whispered in her ear, This is your old father's car. Wei Wei Bai, you're a man who pierces tires. You're courting death. How dare you pierce my family's car? Wei Wei Bai's expression changed, and she hurried over. She was very stingy now. She didn't need money to repair the car or tow the car. Her father did not have a car at home. Did he have to take a taxi? It was all money. Yes, she was now in the same situation as Cheong Tong. After becoming a family member, She knew that daily necessities were very expensive. How could he let this prodigal Yi Yuxuan spoil him like this? Wei Wei Bai walked over and found that all 4 tires were punctured. It was too late for her to stop him. On the contrary, Yi Yuxuan stood up very calmly. He was still holding the small knife in his hand. His tone seemed to have relaxed a little. "All right, let's go home." She deliberately emphasized the words "take a car" and "go home." Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment. Such a mature person, such a stoic person, such a cold and emotionless man, was simply like a noble diamond. What was the difference between him and those kids who would prick other people's bicycle wheels after class? In fact, his car was much more expensive than a bicycle. Yi Yuxuan lowered his head and saw that she was staring at him in a daze. His cold face had a hint of warmth and joy. He was not embarrassed at all. Instead, he bent down and gently kissed her fair and flushed cheeks. After her health improved, her face was no longer sickly pale. Instead, it had a reddish color. A healthy color was as beautiful as roses. He liked it very much. Wei Wei Bai quickly reached out and touched her face. She frowned and said, "You stabbed my father's car." Yi Yuxuan said, "I'll buy him 10 new cars. I saw that his car was too old and cheap, so I wanted to upgrade it for him." His nonsense sounded so good. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that this business was too worth it. Yi Yuxuan reached out and held her hand. Then he said, "Let's go back. It's just in time for dinner." Chapter 18:10. Wei Wei Bai heard about dinner and felt hungry. She immediately forgot about the car and was tricked back by Yi Yuxuan. The system, who was watching silently at the side, couldn't help but think while eating its biscuits. Ah, people in love. So damn childish. And the host's IQ dropped. As expected, after soaking in love for too long, water entered her brain. A few cars were coaxed away. But thinking about the 2 of them living a poor life, the system suddenly felt that if a rich woman gave him 10 cars, he might even be happy to be coaxed away. This evil thing would happen. After dinner, Wei Wei Bai played a few games of chess with Bai Changyan, who came to visit. No, to see her. Bai Changyan kept smiling and was in a very good mood. Yi Yuxuan wore gray home clothes and casually stepped on plush slippers. When the assistant said to choose furniture and household items, Yi Yuxuan specifically ordered feminine items. As a result, the apartment was decorated in a feminine way. There were also various furnishings, including slippers and towels. They were all pink and fluffy. Even a mouthwash cup for brushing teeth was a warm color with flower patterns. And the male item paired with Bai Wei Wei was also this kind of warm, fluffy thing. This made Yi Yuxuan not look so cold, at least 2 degrees warmer. He sat beside Wei Wei Bai and casually flipped through the book. Occasionally, he would look at the 2 people playing chess. He glanced at Bai Changyan expressionlessly and then looked at Wei Wei Bai. Her fair fingers were holding a chess piece. Her eyes were calm, and there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. It was rare to see her so simple and relaxed. She had always been nervous. Yi Yuxuan didn't turn the book in his hand. Bai Changyan focused on playing chess and chatted with Wei Wei Bai. "Do you remember when I taught you how to play chess? You were only 6 years old?" At that time, Wei Wei Bai's heart disease started to become serious. Bai Changyan was afraid that his daughter would be sad because she couldn't exercise, so he began to teach her some entertainment that she could do while sitting down. Go was one of them. Wei Wei Bai thought of her childhood and couldn't help but reveal a smile. I still remember that after you taught me Go, I even made you a strawberry pudding to express my gratitude." She said that she did it. In fact, she was still so young and sick. The chefs in the kitchen didn't dare to let her do the work. They just helped her choose the ingredients. He was only responsible for getting a strawberry. When Bai Changyan thought of what had happened at that time, the wrinkles on his eyes started to show. "Yes, it's delicious. My Wei Wei is indeed multi-talented." Wei Wei Bai said shamelessly, "Of course, my strawberry pudding is very delicious." She felt that she was perfect and was good at everything. The thick-skinned father and daughter laughed. There was an unhappy person sitting nearby, looking at them. Although Yi Yuxuan's expression was still paralyzed, there was clearly something wrong with her eyes. He coldly hooked his lips, his fingers fiercely flipping through the book. When Qin Xiao came out of the kitchen with fruit, He saw Yi Yuxuan's eyes full of cold, murderous intent, staring fiercely at Bai Changyan. He could make Yi Yuxuan have murderous intent. Did Bai Changyan do something terrible? Qin Xiu immediately rushed over and put down the fruit. Then he helped Bai Changyan up. "Oh, Mom, it's so late, we won't be able to call a taxi later. We'll go first." Bai Changyan, "Wait, my chess." Qin Xiu dragged Bai Changyan. "Why can't we play chess? Did you forget that some little idiot punctured the tires of your car? Hurry up and go." Slash. Chapter 1811. Qin Xiu finished his words. Why did he feel that Yi Yuxuan's murderous eyes fell on him? This austere killing intent made people feel intimidated just by looking at it. It made his footsteps quicken. When Bai Changyan was dragged out, he said to Wei Bai, "Wei, I'll come to see you tomorrow. Take care of yourself, sleep well, eat well, and be happy." Wei Bai waved her hand. "Okay, Dad, be careful at night." After Qin Xiu and Bai Changyan left, the room suddenly became cold. Even Bai Wei felt cold. She couldn't help but reach out and pull at her collar to warm herself up. Then she silently turned back. She saw Yi Yuxuan sitting in Bai Changyan's seat. He slowly reached out and picked up a chess piece. His fingers had beautiful joints, and the black chess piece was on his white fingertips. It was extremely exquisite. He lowered his head and leaned forward slightly. Under the soft light, his face appeared a little hazy with melancholy, but his eyes were so cold that it made people feel cold. He looked up. "Did you start learning chess when you were a child?" Wei Bai felt that he was in a bad mood. After waking up this time, Yi Yuxuan's mood had been very depressed. His face was still as calm and collected as ever, but she could clearly feel that he was unhappy. It could make a man like Yi Yuxuan's mood fluctuate to the point of being unhappy. It could be a very serious matter. Wei Bai couldn't help but reach out and grab her sleeves. Then she sat back and picked up a chess piece. "Well, my father taught me. After all, I couldn't run and jump around when I was a child. My body was not good." Her heart disease was gradually getting worse. When she became an adult, she completely showed signs of decline and could die at any time. And because of heart disease, there were various diseases caused by heart disease. She was often sick in bed, and her mind was not clear most of the time. So when she made decisions, there were many times when she made mistakes. That was the most difficult period of her life. While she was speaking, Yi Yuxuan gently raised her eyes from the chess piece. Her gaze was unusually focused. Wei Bai's body temperature rose under his gaze. She immediately picked up a chess piece and began to play. "Then who taught you how to play Go?" "Yi Yuxuan, no one taught me." He gently placed the chess piece down and continued. "You'll know after watching a few games." Wei Bai snorted in her heart. "Look at you. Just by watching a few games of Go." He wanted to defeat her, the little genius Go player who had played all over the Bai family when she was young and was invincible in school. Dream on. Wei Bai looked at the chessboard. Why was she losing? She clearly had the upper hand in the chessboard just now. Wei Bai quickly lowered her head and tried to salvage the situation. However, Yi Yuxuan was not thinking about this. If he was focused on playing chess, he would know. He was about to beat Wei Bai. Yi Yuxuan casually placed another chess piece down and asked casually, "You know how to make strawberry pudding?" Wei Bai stared at the chessboard. She was going to lose. She was going to lose. Was her title as the little genius Go player going to be inherited by Yi Yuxuan? As she was too focused on the chessboard, she did not hear Yi Yuxuan clearly. She only heard strawberry pudding. She said, "If you want to eat it, I'll get the chef to make it for you." However, Yi Yuxuan was such a cold man. It was really unexpected that he liked strawberry pudding. Yi Yuxuan originally realized that the situation on the chessboard was unfavorable to Wei Bai. She was about to deliberately lose to make Wei Bai happy. Then, she heard Wei Bai's words. Chapter 1812. His fingers paused, and his expression turned cold. Then he knocked the chess piece in his hand heavily on the chessboard. With this strike, all of Bai Wei's pieces on the chessboard collapsed. He lost. Wei Bai felt that this world was too unreal. She had played Go for so many years. Yi Yuxuan had only watched a few games, and he had already won. How could this world be so unfair? How could there be a cheat like Yi Yuxuan? Did God send him to attack the entire world? Wei Wei Bai stared blankly at Yi Yuxuan and couldn't help but complain to the system. Does Yi Yuxuan really like me? How could he have such a lonely attitude towards the person he likes? The system ate its dried fish silently, not daring to say anything. Wei Wei Bai silently despised the system. Yi Yuxuan knocked the chess piece, then looked up and said indifferently, "You lost." Wei Wei Bai really wanted to shamelessly flip the chessboard and deny that she had lost. But in the end, under Yi Yuxuan's oppressive gaze, she really didn't dare to move. Wei Wei Bai finally realized that Yi Yuxuan's mood was really not right. She couldn't help but ask, "Are you in a bad mood?" Yi Yuxuan smiled coldly. "Very good." Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment, then said, "Why don't I buy you strawberry pudding?" Yi Yuxuan looked at her indifferently, as if strawberry pudding could not move him. Wei Wei Bai didn't know why, but she suddenly thought of what she had said when she was playing chess with Bai Chanyan. She thought about it, and her tone softened a little. "Then, I'll make you strawberry pudding." Yi Yuxuan looked at her quietly, not saying anything. Wei Wei Bai finally understood. Wasn't he jealous? It was because she had made strawberry pudding for her father when she was young. He wanted it too, so he had been acting strangely. "If you want to eat it, you should have said so earlier. If you want to eat it, you should have said so earlier. How would I know if you don't tell me? If you wanted to eat, why didn't you say so?" Wei Wei Bai kept complaining in her heart, but she still rolled up her sleeves and said, "It's just strawberry pudding. I'll make it for you right away." With that, she walked towards the kitchen. Then, she immediately took out her phone in the kitchen. What was the recipe for strawberry pudding? Baidu, Google, Sogu, and various other search engines were on it. It was all for the sake of finding a simpler method. For strawberry pudding, there must be strawberries first. Nonsense. Then there was white granulated sugar. There was some in the fridge. Guillotine powder. What the hell was that? Wei Wei Bai had never been to the kitchen before. Even when she was in the kitchen, people would beg her to leave. He looked at the simple recipe in silence. After a long moment of silence, she finally reacted. How could such a smart and perfect person be stumped by a strawberry pudding? Then she was like a big hamster trying to get what she wanted from the fridge. She didn't know how to cook, but she could at least read. He really did find the ingredients for her pudding. Then, she started to make it. Sigh, I accidentally mistook salt for sugar. If I add more sugar, it won't be too salty. Strawberries, I forgot to wash the strawberries. If I don't wash them, there will be more bacteria. It will be healthier if I eat them. I seem to have added seasonings that weren't in the recipe. Add more, and the taste will be richer. The system was dumbfounded at the host's various cooking methods. Damn, how much hatred did she have against Yi Yuxuan? Was she making poison on the spot to poison Yi Yuxuan to death? The male lead was also big-hearted. He actually left the kitchen to the host and couldn't resist coming in to take a look. He wasn't afraid that the food would explode and the two of them would die together. Wei Wei Bai poured the mixture of strawberry pudding ingredients into the petal mold. Then, she put it in the fridge to chill. Chapter 1813. She looked at the fridge and felt that she was really amazing. She could make pudding like this. Yi Yuxuan, who was sitting in the living room, flipped through his work documents, but his eyes were not focused. There is no need to use knives to make pudding, so it should be fine. After all, Wei Wei Bai's ability to blow up the kitchen was indeed very worrying. He was counting the time. If it was too long, he would go in to check on the situation. He was a little reluctant to disturb her. After all, she made pudding for him personally. Yi Yuxuan's indifferent face and calm eyes softened a little. Wei Wei Bai washed her hands and walked out to see Yi Yuxuan putting away the chess pieces. He had just put them into a box. When she walked over, he looked up and observed her from head to toe. After confirming that she was fine and that there were no wounds on her fingers, he lowered his eyes again. Wei Wei Bai smiled and said, "Open the fridge yourself in 2 or 3 hours. This is the first time I made pudding so complete." Actually, she had never done it before. The one for her father was made by the chef. She was in charge of getting the strawberries. Yi Yuxuan was silent for a while before saying slowly, "That's a great honor." Wei Wei Bai said casually, "You deserve it. It's been hard on you while I was sleeping." She was grateful that he took care of her family's company. took care of her father, and took care of her. More importantly, he gave her life points. That was the main point. Yi Yuxuan's lowered eyelashes trembled slightly. Then, he revealed an extremely gentle smile. It was so light that people who saw it thought that they were seeing things. Then, he said very softly, "Seeing you, I never feel that it's hard." After thousands of journeys, he had accompanied her through so many dreams. Every dream, no matter what, he had been stabbed and his heart dug out. He never felt that it was hard. He only felt extremely lucky. Because no matter what, a dream was still a dream. When he opened his eyes and woke up, she was still by his side. This was the greatest redemption for him. Wei Bai felt that Yi Yuxuan was spouting cheesy words of love again. It was obvious that he had been poisoned by those 100 ways to pick up girls' books. Even someone as strong as Yi Yuxuan was a straight man who had never pursued a girl before. Wei Bai couldn't help but rub her nose. But he was so inexperienced in chasing her. She had her vanity too. This kind of mentality was unacceptable. Who knew when he wouldn't be able to hold on and would force himself on Yi Yuxuan? Wei Bai suppressed this impulse and yawned tiredly. Yi Yuxuan got up and walked to her side. He reached out to hold her face and looked at the slight traces of fatigue between her eyebrows. His gaze was deep and complicated. He seemed to be hesitating, but in the end he sighed and said, "Let's go to sleep. It's getting late." Wei Bai glanced at the time. It was 11 o'clock. It was indeed too late. His palm was against her face. It was warm and dry. It was very comfortable. Wei Bai imperceptibly rubbed against Yi Yuxuan as if she was taking advantage of him. Yi Yuxuan's fingers stiffened for a moment, but he didn't go any further. He just released her face with difficulty. Then he followed her to the bedroom. The bed was very big. There was some medical equipment beside the bed. Wei Bai knew that after her body started to recover recently, these equipment hadn't been used. She didn't care and climbed into bed. Yi Yuxuan pulled the blanket over with one hand and then covered her with the blanket with both hands. Wei Bai closed her eyes and found that Yi Yuxuan was still sitting by the bed. She couldn't help but mutter, "Yi Yuxuan, you should go to bed early too." Yi Yuxuan's voice was very calm. "There's no hurry. I'll wait for the pudding to cool down before I sleep." To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click Save at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1814. Wei Bai narrowed her eyes. She was indeed a little tired. She softly said to the system, "Take me away, Tongzi." The system did not reply. Yi Yuxuan was here, so he did not dare to make sound. Although he did not hear the system's reply, Wei Bai knew that he could hear it. Yi Yuxuan could not hear what Wei Bai said to the system, but he observed the subtle changes in her expression and confirmed that she was asleep. He did not stop her, nor did he make sound. He just looked at her quietly. Wei Bai had a big heart. Before she went to sleep, she could not help but whisper, "I didn't expect Yi Yuxuan to be a man who likes strawberry pudding. So cute." When Yi Yuxuan heard this, the corners of his mouth moved. Finally, after she fell asleep, he said, "I'm only cute to you." He did not like strawberry pudding. Instead, he liked her childhood that he did not participate in, and the feelings of her personally making things for him. Yi Yuxuan was not a childish child. He knew that he was deliberately tormenting her and making unreasonable requests. But if he did not beg so childishly, she would not have paid any attention to him. Yi Yuxuan reached out and held her slender wrist. It once had their forever on it. He put her hand beside his cheek. His expression was obscure and repressed. The moment the red string broke, he suffered an unimaginable blow. That kind of bone-deep pain and that thing's warning made him completely lose the connection between the two of them. He was the one who forced it, but she left again and again, in her cold and heartless eyes. It made him fall into the hell of nightmares. He desperately needed something for her to leave behind to comfort his heart that was full of holes. No matter how strong he was, he could not stand her personality of leaving just like that. Yi Yuxuan sat beside Wei Bai's bed for a long time. Only then did he see a pair of child's hands carefully take out a white ball of light from her body. Yi Yuxuan's eyes were half closed, as if he could not see, just as the system was relieved and was about to leave. Yi Yuxuan suddenly opened his mouth. His low voice was filled with icy, killing intent. I don't care who you are. If you can't take good care of her, I'll skin you alive and grind your bones to dust. The system's hands trembled, and it almost threw Wei Wei Bai's soul out. He hurriedly hugged Wei Wei Bai in fear and trepidation. Not daring to answer, he crawled and rolled across the plain. The male lead was indeed the male lead. Why did he have to be so ruthless when he was threatening the system? The system was in tears. It was taking care of him. Why didn't it take care of him? Was it not enough for him to take care of her like an ox or a horse? Yi Yuxuan saw that her breathing had become more subtle and knew that she had left. He couldn't help but lower his head, as if he had been wronged and upset. After a long time, he finally let go of her hand and tucked her in. He got up and bent down to give her a kiss. Then he walked out. The room was a little empty in the middle of the night. He went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator door, and began to search. As if he was searching for a treasure, he finally took out the strawberry pudding she made from the refrigerator. The appearance was still okay. It was red, although it was much darker than ordinary strawberry pudding. At least it still looked like food. Yi Yuxuan took out a small bowl and poured the strawberry pudding into the bowl one by one. Then he picked up the chopsticks and elegantly put one into his mouth. It tasted bad. This taste, it was beyond the scope of human understanding. Yi Yuxuan couldn't help but smile. It was really made by her, a pudding that poisoned people. Yi Yuxuan calmly ate it one by one. It tasted bad, but it was sweet. Chapter 18:15. Wei Wei Bai reached out to touch her forehead. What a headache. Memories flooded in. All of them were various formula exam questions, 3 years of mock exams, 5 years of college entrance exams, mathematics, physics, science, intelligence, such a large amount of knowledge. She almost crashed and died on the spot. Then she looked down and saw that she was holding a pen, and the classroom was filled with the rustling sound of doing questions. The invigilator wore glasses, his face drooping, and his eyes were like a vulture surveying the entire classroom to see if any student dared to shake their heads. The system immediately said, "Did you receive it? I just sent you the super genius secret book. This was carefully selected by me. Bah, this is the reward of this world side mission. To deal with this world." The system deliberately sold its antique cabinet and bought the super genius secret book for Wei Wei Bai. Guaranteed that Wei Wei Bai would get first place in every exam. Guaranteed to get first place in college entrance exams. Choose any school from home or abroad. Bai Weiwei's face was blank, but she didn't know why, but her fingers automatically brushed and wrote the answers on the exam paper. It was as fast as a computer photocopying the answers. The handwriting was beautiful. The answers were clean and neat. All correct. The Super Genius Secret Book said so, and when she was writing the answers, her mind slowly woke up, and the memories of the original owner of this world also appeared. The original owner was a top student, the super awesome kind. In addition to her own talent, the original owner also wanted to get out of the slums. The original owner's parents divorced, and her mother took her to marry her alcoholic and gambling stepfather. Her mother worked several jobs to make life better for the family. In the end, when she was helping to cook at the construction site, she was smashed to death by a piece of steel. The contractor paid $60,000 to $70,000, and the scumbag stepfather privately settled it. And this money was all taken by the scumbag stepfather to gamble. And the original owner was in her 3rd year of high school. Under this pressure, she turned all her strength into fighting for the exams. If she didn't go to a good university and get a scholarship, then she might have to rot in the slums for the rest of her life. So before Wei Wei Bai, the original owner was already the top student in the mock exams in her 3rd year of high school. After reading these memories, she couldn't help but sigh. It was really tough. However, there didn't seem to be any information about the target. It seemed that in this plane, the original owner had no enmity with the target. It was fine as long as there was no enmity between them. There were also no ghosts or monsters from the previous dimension, so there was no need to worry about them getting into trouble. Once, Wei Wei Bai had suffered a lot. She would definitely be more vigilant in the future. This exam was a regular class exam, so Bai Weiwei handled it with ease. She was the first to finish writing and then sat there calmly. The invigilator's sharp and terrifying gaze landed on Weiwei Bai. Immediately after, the spring breeze turned into rain and the atmosphere became peaceful. Even though Weiwei Bai was sleeping on her stomach, the teachers would turn a blind eye to it. This was the treatment of a good student. Weiwei Bai didn't hear the system's reminder, so she didn't know who the target of this plan was. She was browsing through some information about this plane in her mind. For example, the high school that she entered was a private one, and all kinds of resources were especially good. The library was the largest in the province. Even the quality of the teachers was very good because of the high salaries. This school was good in many ways. It was just that there were bad students everywhere. Yes, such a good school, a bunch of bad students. But this kind of bad student was different from other bad students. The bad students were rich and powerful, and they gathered in groups. Chapter 1816. Poor people like Weiwei Bai who were top students were specially recruited to improve their grades and to cope with various inspections by the higher-ups. Weiwei Bai entered this school because the teachers were good and the library was good. More importantly, food and scholarships were provided. Weiwei Bai thought for a while before concluding. She couldn't afford to offend a bad student. After all, she was poor now. She knew very well what a rich and powerful family meant to a poor person. It meant that it was easy for them to kill you. She was born into a rich family, and the taste of power was particularly terrible. What was more terrible was that the power was not in her hands. Weiwei Bai couldn't help but tap her perfect exam paper with her fingers. Forget it. I'll familiarize myself with this world first. The system suddenly said, It's coming, it's coming. Weiwei Bai frowned. What's coming? The exam was almost over, and suddenly there was a sound of footsteps at the door. The footsteps were a little messy, but also very casual. The teacher's unusually serious face immediately piled up a smile. A slender figure walked in from the door. He seemed to have just come from the campus. He casually pulled open a few buttons on his collar, revealing a white and delicate neck. The sun was a little hazy today. Under the soft sunlight, his cold and somewhat evil eyes were unusually stunning and eye-catching. The teacher went up to him and was about to say something. He raised the corner of his mouth and asked casually, What about the exam? The teacher immediately replied, Yes, but it's just a small test to find out the recent revision situation of the students. The other party was like a principal. The teacher was more like a student. Weiwei Bai heard the system's reminder. This mission is to win the love of Xiao Hanyang. Target, Xiao Hanyang. Completion, 0. Time, 1 year. This time, the time was reduced. Weiwei Bai felt good. She could finally go back early. Xiao Hanyang's information was also sent randomly. In this private school where bad students were everywhere, the biggest bad student was Xiao Hanyang. And such a bad student could still make the teacher nod and bow. First, his family was rich. Secondly, this school was built with his family's money. The extent to which they were rich meant that their family business was already a large international company. It was normal for a project to be worth billions. Weiwei Bai expressed that this was really quite rich. Moreover, in this generation of the Xia family, there was only one son, Xiao Hanyang. Everyone in the family doted on this young master. As a result, this young master had been domineering since he was young. His eyes were practically flying to the sky, and he never lowered his head to look at others. He was willful and had a violent personality. He was the kind of person who was feared by everyone, but he couldn't resist being rich. That's right, this evil money society. Rich people were all fucking bosses. Even this school was built for Xia Hanyang by the elders of his family when he was still in the womb. Kindergarten, primary school, middle school, and high school were integrated into a comprehensive school for the wealthy. Even if Xia Hanyang had 0 points from the beginning to the end, he would still be able to rise. They had worked hard to buy a house in the school district and had exhausted all their resources to send their children to a key school. And Xia Hanyang's family had prepared a school for him. Weiwei Bai thought that if he was so obedient, it would be impossible for him not to become a dandy. Serve him right. After reading the information on Xiao Hanyang's bad grades and all kinds of information on bullying others, Wei Wei Bai thought silently that this was a rich family that couldn't last more than 3 generations. The next generation of the Xia family would definitely be ruined by a bad student like Xia Hanyang. Slash. Quick transmigration system. Male god, come here. Chapter 1817. Bad family style, bad family luck. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her nose with a headache because there was too much information in her head. She suddenly felt that something was wrong. A shadow shrouded the person in front of her in her neat and tidy paper. She looked up in a daze and saw Xia Hanyang standing in front of her. He seemed to be passing by. He was tall, but not exaggeratedly so. His sleeves were casually rolled up, revealing his fair wrist. He was wearing an expensive watch. His fingers were white and slender, and his nails were unusually round and clean, even if he looked like a rascal and wanton. It was obvious that he was indeed rich. Only when he was in a noble environment at all times could he be so careless and beautiful. After all, in this day and age, it would cost money to hire someone to trim your nails. Not to mention the watch on his wrist, the cufflinks on his buttons, and the shoes on his feet. Once he put it on, there was no need to talk about the clothes. The watch was almost 1,000,000 yuan. Wei Wei Bai calmly looked away. Although she was poor, she was still rich in real life. She would not drool over other people's clothes. But in the next second, those beautiful, round fingers pressed down on her paper. Then Wei Wei Bai heard his slightly impatient voice. "This is it. Change my name and take it to my uncle." Xia Hanyang's voice became cold. "If I find out who complained that I got 0 marks in every subject and caused the old man to ask about my results, I will make him die a horrible death." Wei Wei Bai blinked and saw the paper being picked up and was about to be taken away. She did not say anything at first. After all, Xia Hanyang's information was still in her mind. If she offended him, forget about the strategy. It was still a problem whether she could survive. Wei Wei Bai was about to calmly watch the paper being taken away. The system immediately shouted, "Take the paper back. If you don't take it back, you will lose control of the book." Wei Wei Bai, ? The system said, "The prodigy's book has a flaw. It can guarantee you full marks in every subject, but the test papers can't be replaced. This is a one-person book. If the male protagonist takes it away and replaces his name, it will become a 2-person book. This is illegal. It was his fault for buying it at a discount. That was why this thing was defective. Wei Wei Bai, is it very troublesome? Why was there a trap in giving a side reward?" The system said, "You'll be locked up in a small black room for 3 years." Wei Wei Bai, the system kindly explained, "That's right, you're in prison. After 3 years, you'll be released. The time for the main mission has passed, and you've failed." This punishment was going to cost her life. Wei Wei Bai instinctively reached out and grabbed the test paper. Then, she quickly and accurately snatched it into her hands. Xia Hanyang didn't look at Wei Wei Bai at all. He was looking at the test paper. Wei Wei Bai's test paper was very neat, and her handwriting was very smooth and beautiful. This kind of test paper was pleasing to his eyes. As for whether the answer was correct or not, what was the score? Anyway, it couldn't be 0. So, he casually took Wei Wei Bai's test paper and planned to throw it to the lackeys behind him. He wanted them to take it to the old master. He wanted to let him know that he was still hard-working in school. When he took the test paper, he didn't expect that as soon as he picked it up, a hand would fiercely snatch the test paper from his hand. Xia Hanyang's fingers paused. The empty fingertips made him a little stunned. It wasn't that he was slow. It was that he was used to being a tyrant. He never thought that someone would dare to snatch something from him. Chapter 1818. Xia Hanyang's eyes, which were floating in the sky, finally lowered. His eyes fell on Wei Wei Bai's face with hostility. Wei Wei Bai also realized that in her current situation, she would be courting death if she confronted Xia Hanyang head-on. Although the teacher nodded and bowed to flatter her, he was not a bad person. Everyone in the outside world was under a lot of pressure. They had to support their families. Seeing Wei Wei Bai's courting death, the teacher rushed over and said fiercely, "What's wrong with you? It's just a test paper. Give it to student Xia." Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Her brown and hazy eyes were suddenly stained with tears. Her fingers trembled as she held the test paper. She looked at Xia Hanyang in a daze and found that he was staring at her like a poisonous snake staring at a poor frog. Wei Wei Bai immediately lowered her head, her fingers clutching the test paper tightly. Her whole body trembled, but she did not put down the test paper. To save this poor girl and the top student in his class, the teacher threw caution to the wind and grabbed the test paper. Apologize to student Xia. It's your honor that student Xia likes your test paper, the teacher said while winking at her. If she did not give it to him, she would be bullied to death. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. Finally, she reached out and handed the test paper to Xia Hanyang. Student Xia, I'm sorry, she said softly, as if she had been bullied badly. Xia Hanyang frowned in disgust. He did not do anything to her. What was wrong with her looking like this? Xia Hanyang impatiently pulled her test paper, but he was too strong. There was a tearing sound. The test paper was torn in half. Xia Hanyang held half of the test paper. His delicate and handsome face suddenly became gloomy. She did it on purpose. He lowered his head coldly, only to see Wei Wei by staring blankly at the test paper in her hand. Her face was pale, as if she had suffered a big blow. She did not look like she did it on purpose. Xia Hanyang was impatient. He crumpled the test paper in his hand and threw it on the ground. Then he looked up and casually grabbed the paper of a boy next to him and threw it to the person behind him. Go and report back. With that, he walked towards the door. He couldn't be bothered to come to class. The teacher respectfully escorted him out of the door like a send-off master. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -10. When Wei Wei Bai heard the notification, the pitiful expression on her face disappeared. She was very experienced in pretending to be pitiful. Xia Hanyang was a brainless and impatient elementary school scum. This was the attitude she deserved. Xia Hanyang was used to seeing others being submissive, humble, and pitiful. He looked down on this kind of people the most, so he was too lazy to deal with them. Therefore, she had to get through this crisis first. As for -10 favorable impression points, he had even experienced -50. -10 was really not a lot. Wei Wei Bai calmly placed the two halves of the paper on the table and then took out the paste from under the desk. It was left over from when he was painting a poster for the school. Then, she carefully stuck the two halves of the paper back together. After all, although the scores of this test were small, when the scholarship was given, the results of the daily test would also be taken into account. Wei Wei Bai finished pasting the paper and said to the system, the target of this plane is not difficult to deal with, but he really deserves a beating. System, as long as there is no hatred for his father. He thought that the red line was broken, and this plane would encounter a perverted blackened target. Then, what kind of deep hatred would there be? Bai Weiwei thought about it, and it made sense. For a moment, Xia Hanyang looked cute. To facilitate the next reading, you can click on Chapter 1819. After school, Wei Wei Bai carried her backpack and walked out of the school gate. She did not stay overnight. After all, the dormitory fees in a private school were very high, and she could not afford it. Her alcoholic and scumbag stepfather was often not at home. Thus, returning to the slums to live was the most cost-effective. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless as she thought about her strategy for the future. In a year's time, she would be able to go back a few months after the college entrance exam. She would be able to get close to Xia Hanyang, the dandy elementary school scumbag. Moreover, she had to get 100 marks. This difficulty was not even close to hell level. Wei Wei Bai calmly thought about her character. A little white flower, a pitiful little girl, definitely would not work. Xia Hanyang was very impatient with people with this kind of character. He did not see her pitiful appearance when they were unrelated and did not know each other. His favorable impression of him plummeted. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said to the system, Xia Hanyang deliberately did not study, which caused his grades to be so bad. Or is there something wrong with his brain that caused his grades to be so bad? The system said he deliberately did not study, and then there's something wrong with his brain. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. In other words, this scumbag was really a scumbag. However, whether his grades were good or not was not her problem. If there was something wrong with his brain, the strategy might be easier. Wei Wei Bai had just smiled when she heard the sound of fists hitting flesh. There was also a painful groan. In an alley not far from the school, a group of people were ganging up on a classmate. School violence. Bai Weiwei's face was expressionless. She looked straight ahead and walked over, completely indifferent. Suddenly, her footsteps slowed down. The people in the alley were committing violence. In front of the wall beside the alley, there was a familiar tall figure leaning against the wall, his elegant fingers holding a cigarette. In the dense smoke, beside the green creeper, his expression was cold and bored as he smoked and waited. His beautiful and handsome face in the green leaves was indescribably casual and cold. It was Xia Hanyang. He said coldly and impatiently, "Break one hand, and this quickly." He was probably teaching the people who had offended him a lesson. This young master would usually beat you up if you were an eyesore on campus. It was simply a scumbag walking machine. Also, the lackeys around him were all rich and powerful young masters. No one could afford to offend him. More desperate cries for help came from the alley. Weiwei silently retracted her foot and decided not to pass by. Now was not the time to show off. He had to avoid this target first. Next time, he would find a suitable opportunity to approach him. Weiwei was just about to turn around and leave. Behind her, Xia Hanyang suddenly said, "The ugly woman in front, come here." Weiwei, "Ugly woman, ugly woman." Weiwei's face was expressionless. Under her thick black bangs, a pair of cold eyes twisted. The corners of her mouth twitched as she silently lowered her head and slumped her shoulders. Step by step, he walked to a meter away from Xia Hanyang like an authentic, cowardly, and pitiful animal. Her voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. "Student Xia, what's the matter?" He pinched her chin with one hand and lifted her face. Her face was unusually pale because of malnutrition. Her lips had lost their color and were a little pale. Her eyes were hidden behind her bangs, and it was almost impossible to see her emotions. Xia Hanyang was a little disgusted by her dull appearance. He let go of her chin and reached out to wipe his fingers with a handkerchief. "You must be the ugly woman who always got first place in the exam." Chapter 1820. Ugly freak, ugly freak. The wind blew past, blowing up her murderous black eyes. That gloomy and terrifying look disappeared in a flash. Soon, she looked dull and humble again. Xia Hanyang didn't see what she looked like. After all, people like Weiwei were everywhere. He didn't even want to waste time looking at her. "Take out your homework." Someone gossiped in front of the old master that his grades were the last in school. Everyone knew that he was the last. The old master had also given up hope that his grades would improve. He just hoped that he would go to class, do his homework, and do his exams well. It didn't matter if he got a 0 as long as there was an exam. Xia Hanyang was too lazy to go to class and didn't even want to take a pen to do his homework. But the butler sent by the old master insisted on checking his homework. He took someone else's homework to hand in, so the butler didn't dare to say anything. Weiwei silently took out her homework from her school bag. Top students always finished their homework before school ended. She was no exception. Moreover, the flaw of the secret manual was limited to the exams. It didn't matter if the homework was given. For secret manuals, the only thing that mattered was the exams. Everything else was trivial. Weiwei took out her homework and handed it to Xia Hanyang. Suddenly, she heard the words, oh God. Morality has declined. The world is unfair. Bad students are only fit to kneel before the genius. Weiwei was deaf. The system notification was louder than 10 gongs in unison. The side mission is activated. Bad students are not good enough for top students. Top students can only be with top students. Weiwei, she had a bad feeling. Sure enough, in the next second, the system notification roared. The target is too bad at school. The top student training index will be activated. The side mission will only be completed if the index exceeds 100. The side mission will be punished if the index is lowered. Index activated. Weiwei, top student index 100. Perfect. Xia Hanyang, top student index -50. The index is too low. The host will be punished. The punishment will be randomly selected. 300 degrees of myopia. Weiwei was at a loss. This side mission was too exciting. Her head was still ringing. What top student index? And her eyes were blurred. Wei Wei Bai blinked. The scenery in the distance was all white. It felt like everything was covered in white gauze, but also like floating ashes. Xiao Hanyang's face, on the other hand, seemed to have been enhanced with a high-gloss beauty effect. The soft light made him look delicate and hazy. Wei Wei Bai, who had never experienced myopia before, felt that half of her eyes were blinded. She was not used to this feeling. Xiao Hanyang reached out and grabbed the exercise book. When he was about to take it away, he found that he couldn't move it. His eyes, which were too lazy to look at others, finally lowered coldly. His lazy eyes carried traces of irritable malice. Wei Wei Bai also wanted to give the exercise book to Xiao Hanyang, but it wouldn't give out such a crazy side quest. Countdown. 30 seconds for the host to help the tyrant. If you don't take the exercise book back in 30 seconds, your myopia will continue to deepen. Wei Wei Bai asked the system, "What the hell is deepening my myopia?" The system replied, "You'll go blind." Wei Wei Bai, it didn't matter if she offended Xiao Hanyang. If she went blind, how could she attack him? She wouldn't even be able to find out where Xiao Hanyang was. So Wei Wei Bai was very determined. She resolutely snatched the exercise book back. Xiao Hanyang's eyes, which were full of sarcasm, became sluggish. He glanced at his fingers. Slash. Chapter 1821. You can search for the in Baidu by searching Time Travel System. Prince Charming, come to search book www.sashu.com. Then he looked at the ugly girl who held her homework tightly in front of her chest and took several steps back without saying a word. The corners of Xiao Hanyang's mouth raised lazily into a smile, but it turned cold in an instant. He said, "It seems that you deliberately tore up the test paper in class." He had no impression of Wei Wei Bai at all. He only remembered that she seemed to be the first in every exam. But what did she look like, even in the same classroom? He didn't notice at all. When he went to get her test paper today, he casually glanced at her. His thick black bangs and his casually tied long hair made it obvious that he was extremely poor. It really made his eyes burn. Wei Wei Bai felt that she couldn't pretend to be a poor little girl anymore. The side mission was clearly hanging above her head, waiting to smash her blind. So she calmly looked up, squinted, and barely saw Xiao Hanyang's soft and hazy face. Then she said nothing and pulled out a thick college entrance exam math exercise book from her school bag. She threw the thick exercise book into Xiao Hanyang's hands. "Student Xia, you're in your 3rd year of high school. If you don't work hard, how can you be admitted to university? Top student index, -49, because giving Xiao Hanyang the exercise book was a start. So the top student index rose. Wei Wei Bai quickly figured out what the hell this side mission was. It was to let Xiao Hanyang study hard and improve every day. And any action she did, as long as it was beneficial to this mission, could increase the top student index. Xiao Hanyang held the exercise book and was stunned for a moment. He was at a loss. What was this thing? The teenager who had never done a test paper didn't know the horror of being shrouded by the exercise book. Then he laughed angrily. This ugly girl was brushing him off. He suddenly snatched her school bag. Wei Wei Bai immediately grabbed the strap, and the two of them started a tug of war. Wei Wei Bai indifferently said, "Student Xia, you are wrong. Youth is precious and life is short. We must study well so that we can contribute to the construction of our beautiful motherland." Xiao Hanyang, the real slacker, felt as if he could see the holy light above Wei Wei Bai's head. Nowadays, there were still earthy humans like Wei Wei Bai. Xiao Hanyang sneered, "What a good student. I'll turn you into bricks and cement to realize your great wish." Wei Wei Bai was as calm as the wind. There was no trace of the pitiful look she had in class. She also wanted to soften her attitude, but the academic genius index of the side mission. It was said that a top student should not soften his attitude towards a bottom student. A slacker had to kneel before a top student. A top student couldn't humiliate his status. Therefore, once Wei Wei Bai begged Xiao Hanyang for mercy, she would be blind. These side missions would not end until she was tormented to death. She coldly said, "Classmate, doing homework is very easy. If you don't know how, I'll teach you." Xiao Hanyang looked at the earthy clown girl expressionlessly. Finally, He slowly curved his lips into a smile. You want to teach me? Wei Wei Bai finally looked up. Her eyebrows were extremely delicate and pretty. Her black eyes were a little hazy and seemed to have no focus. Her face was pale, with a trace of colorless fragility. Even her lips were pink, without the bright colors of healthy people. Her light pink lips moved slightly, and she calmly said, Well, students should help each other and trust each other. Let's help each other and study hard. Let's have a good senior year. The clown girl looked okay. Xia Hanyang was in a trance for a moment, but after being disobeyed, a violent anger surged up. And Chapter 1822. Since when did idiots dare to provoke him like this? He was worried that he had no toys and was bored. So he sent an idiot like Wei Wei Bai to annoy him. Xia Hanyang suddenly loosened the strap of the school bag. Wei Wei Bai immediately stumbled back a few steps. He threw away the quiz book in his hand, as if it were a piece of trash. Wei Wei Bai's face changed. She immediately rushed over and picked up the quiz book, then carefully wiped it clean and put it back in the school bag. Xia Hanyang was speechless at the way she treasured it. Stupid country bumpkin. Xia Hanyang shouted coldly, Get lost. Go play. Hearing this, the lackeys in the alley immediately kicked the boy who had offended Xia Hanyang a few more times. Offended Xia Hanyang. Don't think about mingling in the school in the future. 4 or 5 lackeys clattered out of the alley. They suddenly stopped in unison. Xia Hanyang grabbed Wei Wei Bai's collar and dragged her away. Teach me. I'll let you teach me. Xia Hanyang sneered and stuffed Wei Wei Bai, who couldn't struggle, into the car. Lackey 1. Brother Xia, you have a girl? Lackey 2. She doesn't look like one. Where did this country bumpkin come from? Lackey 3. She seems to be the one who receives the poverty allowance in our school. She always gets the first place in the exam. They called scholarships poverty allowance and begging allowance. And because Bai Wei Wei's grades were so good, people recognized her. Wei Wei Bai also had her own difficulties. In this world, targets like Xia Hanyang didn't like poor people. But he disliked her cold and aloof character even more. With her character, she would die at any moment. Wei Wei Bai, Tongzi, what the hell is this side task? In the past, there was only one punishment. This time, there are a bunch of punishments, and they are random. Randomness was the most terrible thing. You never knew what punishment could take out. The system quickly wrote, Don't be afraid. I'll immediately write a letter to scold the main system and make it explode with anger. Then it won't harm us. Wei Wei Bai, don't scold it. If it doesn't anger me to death, it will torture me to death. Anyway, side tasks had always been so strange. She was used to it. Ha! Xia Hanyang crossed his legs and said to the driver, Amusement park. The driver immediately. Bai Wei Wei immediately reached out to feel for the seatbelt. When she touched it, she felt a hand with delicate skin and a dry temperature. Xia Hanyang only felt a soft and slightly cold hand on the back of it. He frowned and turned to look, only to see Bai Wei Wei suddenly withdraw her hand. She lowered her head, and her cheeks were slightly red. It brought out a few faint traces of glamour. It was unspeakably cute. Xia Hanyang immediately felt a chill. He took out a silk handkerchief and wiped his hands desperately, for fear of being infected by Wei Wei's earthy smell. How could he think that a country girl was cute? There must be something wrong with his eyes. Xia Hanyang impatiently kicked the back of the seat in front of him. Drive faster. Do you know how to drive if you're so slow? The driver immediately stepped on the accelerator. The car was very stable. It didn't shake much. Wei Wei Bai felt that this kind of environment was good for learning. The academic genius index had risen to -35. She only needed to be expressionless and cold to educate Xia Hanyang. The index would go up. Wei Wei Bai calmly took out the textbook and said gently, Student Xia, not to waste time, I'll teach you today's homework now. Xia Hanyang's mouth twitched. His good-looking eyebrows couldn't help but wrinkle. What the hell? Did this country girl know who she was facing? Did she really think that he wanted her to teach him homework? Obviously, she really thought so. Wei Wei Bai opened the textbook, took out the exercise book, and took out a ballpoint pen of a random brand. Then she said seriously, Come on, Do your homework. Xia Hanyang, /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu, download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. To facilitate the next reading, you can click on the fast comma. Chapter 1823. Wei Wei Bai kindly put a ballpoint pen in his hand. Then she spread out the exercise book and said expectantly, "You write first and ask me if you don't understand. I'll teach you without reservation. We're classmates. Don't be shy." Xia Hanyang grabbed the ballpoint pen tightly and said in a cold voice, "You're so enthusiastic. I can't understand the first page. How are you going to teach me, classmate Bai?" He gritted his teeth when he said the words classmate Bai. Wei Wei Bai calmly looked down at the first page of the textbook, which was a high school basic review exercise book. She raised a pair of unfocused and hazy eyes. She said softly, "This is the basic knowledge that needs to be reviewed in high school. It talks about the concept and operation of sets and the basic relationship between sets. For example, all the elements in sets A and B in the equal relationship, Xia Hanyang. I don't understand. My head starts to hurt." Wei Wei Bai. An empty set is a subset of any set. It's any non, Xia Shuabu. I have a splitting headache. My brain is disabled. Wei Wei Bai. A equals B or B equals A intersection B, Xia Shuabu. Magic sounds control the brain, and the tinnitus is like a knife. Wei Wei Bai. If A intersection B equals A, then AB. If X is an element of A intersection B, then Xia Shuabu. You want to die? Wei Wei Bai. It's very simple knowledge points that even a pig can understand. Xia Hanyang angrily poked the exercise book with a ballpoint pen. Also, your mouth shut if you keep saying ABB, 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 ABB set. What the hell? The irritable Xia Hanyang broke the ballpoint pen and threw it out of the car window. He wanted to tear up the exercise book. Wei Wei Bai was speechless when he threw things out of the car window while driving. If he tore up the exercise book, her academic genius index would definitely drop. She had tried her best to teach him knowledge points, and her academic genius index had risen by 10 points. If he lowered her academic genius index, she would be punished again. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai was like a hungry tiger pouncing on a wolf. She lay on top of Xia Hanyang and clutched the exercise book tightly. "Student Xia, you returned my homework. I was kind enough to teach you how to do your homework. How could you repay my kindness with ingratitude?" Xia Hanyang was knocked against the car window by her soft body. Her large, hazy eyes stared straight at him, and the soft and sweet scent that only belonged to women wafted towards him. Her feet were pressed against his sturdy calves, her fingers clutching the exercise book tightly as her body was pressed against his chest. The way the two of them intertwined was extremely ambiguous. Xia Hanyang's expression darkened at once. "Get out of here, ugly girl." Wei Wei Bai saw that she was about to snatch her homework back and said firmly, "Let go of me." Xia Hanyang found it a little difficult to breathe. He was suffocated by her. His breathing suddenly paused as her cheek lightly brushed past his lips. That soft and delicate skin was slightly cool and smooth. It tasted like pudding and jelly. Xia Hanyang was in the prime of his youth, and his hormones were bursting. When he was touched like this, his blood rushed to his head. He felt an obvious change in his body. Almost without thinking, he let go of the exercise book and pushed Wei Wei Bai away fiercely. Wei Wei Bai held the exercise book as she was pushed into the chair by him. She was a little confused for a moment. Then she immediately checked the homework. Fortunately, there was no problem. If there was another punishment, she would have become blind. After stuffing the homework into her school bag, she breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly feeling that the temperature was a little low, Wei Wei Bai glanced at Xia Hanyang. However, she found that he was looking at her with an extremely frightening and cold gaze. It seemed like he was examining something. Chapter 1824. But he soon frowned and wiped his lips. His thin and cold lips were inconceivably beautiful against her fair fingertips. After wiping his mouth, he crossed his legs awkwardly and sneered. Homework? People like me don't need homework. Wei Wei Bai looked calm, and her eyes were full of pity for a bad student. All bad students said so, because they didn't know how to write at all. A life that didn't even know how to do homework was really miserable. Xiao Hanyang felt that Wei Wei Bai's eyes, which were hidden under her bangs, seemed to be looking at him with ridicule. His irritable body temperature hadn't cooled down yet, and he was very angry and kicked the back of the seat in front of him. Have we arrived? Are your feet disabled? Don't you know how to step on the accelerator? You drive so slowly. The driver said, We've arrived, young master. Xiao Hanyang impatiently pulled at the collar button. Why did he feel so hot when there was air conditioning? He suppressed the impulse of being teased by Wei Wei by just now. After all, at this age, the body was strong and the blood was hot. A casual touch could make a boy unable to sleep at night. Of course, Xiao Hanyang's self-control was much stronger. He was used to big scenes. How could he feel uncomfortable all over because of an ugly woman's touch? It must be because the food he ate at noon was too nutritious. That was why he was so out of control. Xiao Hanyang couldn't help but look at Wei Wei Bai. He found that she was sitting obediently. Her long hair was simple and tied with a cheap hairband. Her bangs were thick and long, and he could barely see her eyes. He could only see her white and delicate cheeks without any color, and her lips that had lost their color. Unexpectedly, they weren't ugly. Her thin shoulders and slender neck were as fragile as paper. Xiao Hanyang had never seen such a thin body. It seemed that she hadn't eaten enough since she was a child. But her skin was surprisingly white, so white that he could see the light blue blood vessels under her skin. He thought of the touch when his lips accidentally brushed against her cheek just now. That kind of cool and pleasant-smelling feeling, Xiao Hanyang gasped. What was he thinking? He actually had feelings for this ugly and dumb woman whose brain was so low that it could explode from learning. Thinking of this, Xiao Hanyang immediately sat sideways and tried to suppress the vigorous energy of youth. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and saw the lid of the ballpoint pen that had fallen at Xiao Hanyang's feet. As a student with a perfect score, she had to behave appropriately. So she calmly bent down and reached for the lid. Just as Xiao Hanyang was about to suppress his exuberant energy, he saw Wei Wei Bai bend over, exposing her beautiful nape to him. The collar of the school uniform was pulled back because of the bending. Below her neck, the flawless, beautiful, powdery white skin on her back was exposed. Xiao Hanyang finally couldn't stand it anymore. He grabbed Wei Wei Bai's collar, lifted her up, and threw her back into the chair. Sit properly. If you keep acting like this, I'll admit that you're shamelessly seducing me. There were many women who approached him. All of them had small waists and were as enchanting as water snakes. She couldn't wait to pester him the moment she saw him. Therefore, he was very tired of this kind of woman seduction. After a long time, he also knew that some scheming Beatrices were thinking about seducing rich men every day. So when he saw a woman trying to approach him, he felt that she had taken a fancy to him. By Wei Wei's expression, she was silent for a while before she tilted her head and looked at him calmly. Then she said word by word, "Seducing you?" Xiao Hanyang saw that she was really a loss and that pair of eyes that could barely focus. In fact, he also felt that it was impossible. When she came to grab the homework just now, she didn't even look at him. //T. Chapter 1825. She was simply snatching homework. He had been provoked by her. He had thought that her acting was more realistic. However, when he turned his head, he saw Wei Wei Bai holding the homework carefully. Not to mention a glance, she had completely forgotten his existence. The homework in her hand was more precious than her life. Xiao Hanyang even had a strange feeling. She put him on one side and the homework on the other. Wei Wei Bai would definitely rush to the homework and completely ignore him. Xiao Hanyang felt a little guilty, but he didn't want to lose. He crossed his hands and rested his chin. His delicate eyebrows were cold, and unruly evil appeared at the corner of his mouth. Posing as a handsome man, he said, "Isn't it normal to like me?" Which woman in school doesn't like me? It's not a shame to seduce me. She could seduce him. It was an honor. Wei Weibai looked at him as if he was a fool. It was not an act. It was a real emotion. She finally said very calmly, I won't like you. Xiao Hanyang's hand on his knee slipped, and his face was crooked. Wei Weibai said seriously, your grades are not good. Xiao Hanyang, bullseye. Wei Weibai didn't want to say such words. Wasn't this stabbing a knife into the target's heart? But the top student index was not allowed to fall in love with a bad student. It was not allowed to show weakness to a bad student. It was not allowed to like a bad student. Didn't you see that at the beginning of the top student index, the bad student had to kneel down to the top student? Wei Weibai said that it was not difficult to conquer the plane, but a side task was at the level of hell. Go to hell and kneel down. Why don't you look at the actual situation? If she asked Xiao Hanyang to kneel down, he would kill her and bury her body. Forget it. She would do what she had to do. Yes, failure was failure. She was tired and annoyed. How could she take care of so many things? She would just treat it as a top student. When the strategy failed a year later, she would write a letter with the system and scold the main system. I'll just die with the main system. Xiao Hanyang could see the calmness in Wei Weibai's eyes. She didn't feel anything and didn't even make any subtle movements. What she said was true. She really felt that his grades were terrible, so she didn't like him. Xiao Hanyang immediately looked back at the half-open window and looked at his own face. He was handsome. He then touched his phone. He could swipe 100 million yuan. Then, he glanced at his car. The global limited edition sports car delivery driver of tens of millions. How could a man like him be defeated by bad grades? Xiao Hanyang sneered. He crossed his arms and leaned against the car seat. Then he said, I think you haven't seen any good men, so you think that grades mean everything. Wei Weibai said calmly. A man with good results is a good man. Xiao Hanyang, isn't it illegal to have good grades? Wei Weibai, the bad students are the main culprits. This was too much. What a map. What a bunch of trash students. Short-sighted little idiot. Xiao Hanyang had forgotten his exuberant energy, thinking that he had been seduced by her. All he could think about was, so what if your grades are terrible? It was fine as long as his grades were bad and he was rich. She was trying to be a teacher to him. Thinking of those tutors who nagged him in the past, they were all taught a lesson by him until they were crippled. Xiao Hanyang thought viciously, I'll make her doubt her life later. I'll let her know what good grades are for. System, the male lead's murderous gaze is not good. Wei Weibai said calmly. He has nothing to do with me. I have to study hard. What is a man? Chapter 1826. System. It's over. The host has been hit by the side mission again. However, the side mission this time was indeed life-threatening. She has to be a top student and can't lose points. She has to change the bad student into a top student and can't lose points. The most ruthless thing is that the host can't have a trace of affection for the bad student male lead and has to be cold and arrogant. She can't have a trace of a pitiful little white flower. How can this be? The host is used to the little white flower, the green tea bitch strategy. If she doesn't eat the little white flower's bowl of rice, she has no rice to eat. Isn't this forcing her to a dead end? Wait, the system took a look at the favorability. Ding, the male lead's favorability is -5. The favorability actually increased? How did it increase? The system felt that this plane was a bit mysterious. The car stopped at the harbor, and Xiao Hanyang took Wei Weibai onto the luxurious cruise ship. The cruise ship had more than 10 floors, with a pool and bikini beauties. Casino, luxury suites, golf course, surf deck, movie theater, and other amusement facilities. People came and went. All of them were people in Xiao Hanyang's circle. At sea, you can play freely and play big. If something happens, no one will care. This was the amusement park that Xiao Hanyang had built on his birthday last year. Wei Weibai was carrying a school bag and wearing a slightly old-school uniform, being dragged by Xiao Hanyang. Country bumpkin, I'll open your eyes. A waiter immediately came over with a drink. Little Gongzi, Xiao Hanyang casually took a cocktail and casually handed it to Wei Weibai. Want a drink? Wei Weibai calmly shook her head, even when she saw such a luxurious yacht. So many rich people gathered together. She didn't have any extreme reaction. Xiao Hanyang glanced at her indifferently, then drank the cocktail in one gulp with no expression on his face. Then, he threw the glass behind him. The glass that fell on a red carpet was immediately cleaned up by a servant. This amusement park had everything that one could wish for. A poor person who had never experienced anything was suddenly pulled into such a luxurious and rich world. It was easy to get lost. At least in the past, Xiao Hanyang wanted to prank or destroy a person. It was to let a person experience something that they were not worthy of. Good wine, beautiful women, power, and money. It was even easier for women. They had all kinds of branded bags, clothes, sports cars, and villas. No one could withstand it. Then, when they got carried away, they would pull back and kick the person out of this world of luxury. After those people were kicked out, they could no longer return to their normal state. The clown girl was really unlucky. It just so happened that he was in a bad mood, and she was right in front of him, provoking his competitive spirit. So he took her to his amusement park. As for Wei Wei Bai's calm expression, he felt that it was normal. She had never seen such a luxurious place before, so it was normal for her to be dazzled for a moment. Xiao Hanyang waved his hand and picked up a glass of white wine that he was used to drinking. While drinking, he calmly glanced at Wei Wei Bai. Indifferent? He snorted and pretended to be indifferent. Do you know how much the ship costs? Wei Wei Bai said calmly. 200 to 300 million. Xiao Hanyang was speechless. Wei Wei Bai said, "Oh, it's US dollars." Xiao Hanyang looked like he had seen a ghost. How do you know? Wei Wei Bai looked up at him like he was an idiot. Isn't this ship called Little Beauty? Xiao Hanyang said, "How do you know this?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Can't you see the big words on the ship?" She had 300 degrees of myopia and could see the 3 big words Little Beauty on the huge cruise ship. Chapter 1827. Xiao Hanyang's voice turned cold. What do you know the price? Wei Wei Bai said, "I need to watch the news broadcast for the exam. I also watch the social news. I think there was news about this ship last year." Xiao Hanyang was confused. News? Wei Wei Bai explained kindly. "I think it was the birthday of a grandson of a wealthy family. The rich grandpa spent more than 200 million US dollars to buy a cruise ship for his grandson. The grandpa also said that it was a reward for his grandson's good grades." Xiao Hanyang's expression became strange. He finally remembered the news. Wasn't it the old man at home? He didn't know what was wrong with him. So what if he gave him a cruise ship? He was just casually brushing him off. He had been reading carefully. The old man was so happy that he immediately spread the news everywhere. To please their family, the news was extremely flattering. When Bai Weiwei said this, she suddenly remembered something and looked at Xiao Hanyang with a puzzled expression. "Were your grades very good last year?" Xiao Hanyang blushed. What was good grades? He had never experienced it since he was born, but he got a lot of zeros. Bai Weiwei saw his expression, and understanding slowly emerged on her face. "I didn't expect that to get a cruise ship, you would, She didn't say much, but she looked like a bad student who was used to committing crimes and lying to get a cruise ship. Xiao Hanyang's face turned black. "I didn't say that my grades were good. That was a false report," Wei Wei Bai said calmly. "Yes." Xiao Hanyang's mind was not confused by Wei Wei Bai, and he immediately caught the loophole. "You actually remember the news from last year?" Although there was news because of his birthday. Because of his protest, the news was not too publicized. Wei Wei Bai actually remembered it? Could it be that she was fully prepared to seduce him? Xiao Hanyang's eyes turned cold. She was indeed a woman, before he could mock her. Wei Wei Bai said faintly, "I don't want to remember it. After all, this is not a test." Xiao Hanyang sneered. He still remembered it. Wei Wei Bai raised her head and said seriously, "But the name Little Beauty is really too low. Such a low name really leaves a deep impression." "Too low, Wei Wei Bai. I wonder which uncultured person came up with that name." "Xiao Hanyang. I was the one who gave him that name." Wei Wei Bai. "I had already forgotten about it, but when I suddenly saw this embarrassing name, I suddenly remembered." Xiao Hanyang. "How was the Little Beauty uncultured?" It was obviously very interesting. Seeing that she was about to sigh, Xiao Hanyang immediately said fiercely, "Shut up." Wei Wei Bai was extremely calm. Oh, okay. Xiao Hanyang was so angry that he choked himself to death. He felt that Wei Wei Bai must be blind. Otherwise, how could she not see the gold decorations on his boat? The boat cost more than 200 million. However, renovations were not included. If everything was included, the price would scare her to death. Xiao Hanyang saw that the casino was very lively. He sneered and then dragged Wei Wei Bai over there. Have you ever gambled? Do you want to teach you how to play? At first glance, he knew that she only knew how to study and stay at home. Let her see the charm of throwing money away. Kneel at his feet and cry and beg. As soon as Xiao Hanyang arrived at the casino, the waiter immediately brought a plate of gambling chips. Several guests who were gambling immediately stood up to greet Xiao Hanyang. Xiao Hanyang calmly responded and then sat down very naturally. His white fingers picked up a gambling chip and threw it on the table. His movements were natural and smooth. Deal the cards. Then he pretended to casually look at Wei Wei Bai, intending to see her admiring eyes. The charm of money was very great. It could defeat all the poor people who pretended to be virtuous. Then he saw Wei Wei Bai standing behind him, not close to the table. He thought that he had too much money. The ugly girl was shocked. He pulled out the chair proudly. Come, brother will teach you how to play. Bai Weiwei glanced at the academic tyrant index. She couldn't lose her points. A bloody line appeared on the top student index. Close to the table, the top student index would fall. So Bai Weiwei silently retreated a few steps. What's with this disgusted, frightened, and disgusted expression? Xiao Hanyang, are you worried about losing money? I'll pay for you. Did she think that he was a liar? Wei Wei Bai finally looked at him hopelessly. You actually gambled. Xiao Hanyang, Wei Wei Bai, underachievers are indeed the main force of criminals. Xiao Hanyang hurriedly explained, I just played. Wei Wei Bai looked incredulous. Gambling at such a young age. Are you still far from being a sex addict? Xiao Hanyang, how could he be a sex addict? If he dared to be a drug addict, the old master would beat him up. What was sex? He was still a virgin. Xiao Hanyang grabbed a plate of gambling chips. Don't you feel anything when you see these? With such a huge wealth, at least her eyes would be a little brighter. Why did he feel that Wei Wei Bai was blind? Wei Wei Bai looked at the gambling chips hesitantly. Feeling, report, I should go home and do my homework. Xiao Hanyang, wait, did you just say that you want to report him? Do your homework? You've done your homework. Crossover system. Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 1828. Xiao Hanyang angrily threw the gambling chips on the table, then stood up and stared at Wei Wei Bai fiercely. Wei Wei Bai calmly stepped back. He approached her quickly, and she quickly stepped back. Suddenly, she bumped into the wall. Under the gorgeous wall lamp, her face was soft and delicate. If it weren't for her thick bangs, she wouldn't be so inconspicuous. Xiao Hanyang patted both sides of her head heavily, and his tall figure shrouded her fragile little body. Bookworm, I gave you face and let you play some games that you can't afford to play in your life, but you don't want it. Wei Wei Bai. Oh my God, I feel like Xiao Hanyang is going to feed me to the sharks. If it were in the past, she would have given in quickly. Just like when they first met, she would have pretended to be pitiful during the conflict in the classroom. That would have given her a chance. But Wei Wei Bai glanced at the rules of the top student index. The words underachiever Neo were so dazzling that it almost blinded her eyes. The punishment was random. Randomness was terrible. Wei Wei Bai was very vigilant about any punishment from the main system. The main system was a bitch, and it probably had a conflict of interest with her. So it was trying to kill her in so many worlds. She couldn't give the main system any chance. So Wei Wei Bai calmly and resolutely raised her head. She stared at Xia Xueqi's face. She whispered to his handsome face, I have to go home and revise. The third year of high school is very important. I can't waste any time on playing, or I won't be able to get into a good university. He kept talking about homework and revising. Xiao Hanyang wanted to hang Wei Wei Bai upside down, pry open her head, and see if it was all kind of exercise books. He was annoyed when he heard this. Suddenly, the laughter of a few lackeys came from behind. They saw the cruise ship sail away. They drove the yacht to have fun. They wanted to see how Xia Hanyang would deal with the top student begging for money. However, when the lackeys came in, they saw the poor top student being pinned against the wall by the fierce-looking Xia Hanyang. Xia Hanyang was still threatening him in a low voice. Their postures, the distance between their faces, their lips were almost touching. The lackeys were shocked. Ah, Xia Hanyang's iron tree blossoms. He misses women. No, it should be said that she used to bully men. He was finally enlightened and wanted to bully women. What the fuck? And the taste is different. He actually took a fancy to a shabby country girl? The lackeys looked at each other and revealed wretched smiles of understanding. Then, they silently left. I won't disturb Brother Xia's search for a woman. Xia Hanyang didn't know how ambiguous his actions were. He grabbed Wei Wei Bai's collar and said, I think you don't know how much money to bet. I don't blame you. You've been poor since childhood. I guess you can't even recognize plastic and gold. He dragged the poor little straight-A student. I'll let you experience supreme enjoyment. Wei Wei Bai looked at him as if he was an idiot. He couldn't help but complain to the system. Is his family very rich? The system replied, very, very rich. Wei Wei Bai, wait, don't you have a family education? Such a rich family can't raise such a nouveau riche child. The system replied, he's an exception. His parents were in a car accident with him. Both of them died, and he was seriously injured. The system complained that it spoke too slowly. It immediately stuffed the detailed information into Wei Wei Bai's mind. Wei Wei Bai's head hurt again, but he knew Xia Hanyang better. To put it bluntly, spoiling him became a disaster. Chapter 1829. After Xia Hanyang's car accident, he was finally rescued. However, he had post-traumatic stress reaction. He didn't eat, drink, or speak. As a result, everyone in the Xia family had to beg him and listen to his every whim, giving him everything he wanted. They didn't want to provoke him and didn't want him to suffer at all. Xia Hanyang was originally a little tyrant, and his character was also very bad and impulsive. If he was educated well, such a character would be very good for business. After all, the most taboo thing for a leader was to be a yes man. However, if he was educated wrongly, with his character, bullying people and being willful and reckless would be a light punishment. Xia Hanyang obviously educated him wrongly. No, it should be said that he didn't educate him at all. To get him out of the trauma, everyone must satisfy any unreasonable request of him. He was forced to have a character where no one could force him to do what he wanted. Then, when the Xia family came to their senses and wanted to correct him, he was already old and didn't listen to advice. Learning was boring. Learning was bullshit. The teachers who taught him were all traumatized by him. Playing was good, so his mind was only thinking about playing. He was stupid, but his mind was very flexible when he played. He wasn't stupid. Wei Wei Bai looked at Xia Hanyang, who grabbed her and looked like a bully. She felt that his IQ was not high. So, to put it bluntly, Xia Hanyang was a playboy who liked to eat, drink, and play, but was mentally retarded in learning. What was even more shocking was that the Xia family had only scolded him verbally. They didn't really educate him at all. Looking at Xia Hanyang, Wei Wei Bai felt that the Xia family was doomed. This kind of prodigal, playboy, and stupid person, no matter how many hundreds of millions it would not be enough for him to spend. Wei Wei Bai was dragged into the elevator and onto the cruise ship on the upper floor. As soon as she got out of the elevator, she saw a group of guests drinking, playing billiards, and smoking outside the elevator. Several male guests were holding enchanting waitresses on their laps. Those waitresses were dressed very skimpily. Wei Wei Bai faintly raised her eyebrows. Their legs were legs, and their breasts were breasts. Their faces were covered with heavy makeup, and it was hard to tell if they were exquisite or not. But his body proportions were really good. An exceptionally beautiful woman in a red low-cut short skirt rushed over. She was probably the best among the waitresses. Young master, long time no see. Xia Hanyang didn't even look at her. All he could think about was how to subdue the clown girl with his financial resources. Forget the work of those dead brain cells. Therefore, when he saw those who were in the way, he kicked them away without a second thought. Scram, don't block the way. Wei Wei Bai saw the waitress being kicked away. He was simply insane. Not only was he a hedonist, But he was also hitting women? No, he said he didn't hit women. That was why he used a kick just now. Wei Wei Bai looked at Xia Hanyang strangely. In the past, although the targets were abnormal, at least they were clear-headed and intelligent. He wasn't as low as Xia Hanyang. This was the first time the target's personality was so indescribable. Xia Hanyang glanced at the billiard ball and thought that the clown girl probably didn't know how to play billiard. He saw the dartboard not far away and thought of something. He smiled. The dart plate was unusually large, and there was a belt on it. Wei Wei Bai glanced at it and basically knew how to play it. She sighed. So boring. Sure enough, the bad student couldn't think of any elegant sports. They were all women who smoked and drank. There was nothing more interesting. She suddenly felt that reviewing her homework was more interesting. / at the bottom to record this reading record. Chapter 1830. Xiao Hanyang picked up the dart and pressed Wei Wei Bai directly to the chair. The waiter brought the drinks. Xiao Hanyang ordered casually juice. The clown girl didn't drink. Girls probably liked juice. After ordering, he frowned. Why did he care about what she liked to drink? But he thought of her drinking delicious food and having fun. He would buy her a few sets of clothes. She would be greedy for money. He would slap her face hard. Refreshing. When the time came, he would watch the clown girl cry miserably to him and ask him not to kick her away. Twice as refreshing. Xiao Hanyang immediately said, "Bring some fruit desserts." Wei Wei Bai's attitude was distant and cold. Her character was now limited. She really didn't have any strategy for Xiao Hanyang, because Xiao Hanyang didn't look like a cold and aloof person, and she was so expressionless and short-sighted. This made her a little desperate for a strategy. Wei Wei Bai even felt that the side task was so bad. Although she wouldn't fail in this world, the strategy's failure was expected. Xiao Hanyang shot the dart in his hand at the huge dart plate. It hit the bullseye. Some guests saw it and immediately applauded. Xiao Hanyang was a little proud and smiled at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was tidying up her school bag and didn't look at him at all. Xiao Hanyang, the juice was served. It was strawberry juice. It was freshly squeezed, and the bright red color was very beautiful. There was also a straw in the cup, and half a decorative strawberry was on the edge of the cup. The dessert was a small chocolate cake, which was decorated with thin gold and was very gorgeous. The ice cream was also light green and light pink. The color was pleasing. These looked good, but people with discerning eyes could tell that they were very expensive. Wei Wei Bai glanced at them lightly. She was hungry, but she didn't touch these things. Who knew if they were drugged? In a strange place, with a bad attacker, she wouldn't touch any of them before asking the system. Even if they could be eaten, she wouldn't touch them first. She would study the rules of being a top student at home. Who knew if he would get demerit points, even if he ate bad grades? Seeing that Wei Wei Bai was indifferent, Xiao Hanyang impatiently took a sip of wine and put the strawberry juice in front of her. Drink! It was almost like an order. If he didn't drink it, he would force it down his throat. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She pursed her lips and asked the system if there was any poison and about the deduction of points. There was no problem in getting it from the system. Wei Wei Bai softened her attitude. She did not use a straw. Instead, she picked up the cup and took a sip. The strawberry juice was exceptionally thick, and when the juice stained her pale lips, it actually looked like a strawberry. It was indescribably beautiful. Xiao Hanyang held a dart in his hand and was about to shoot it. In the end, he accidentally looked at her and saw that her lips were wet with strawberry juice. A few drops of strawberry juice slid under her lips, and she unconsciously stuck out the tip of her small tongue and gently licked them. Xiao Hanyang's hand trembled, and the dart missed its target. It was so far away from the red heart that it almost flew out of the dartboard. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 0. Wei Wei Bai, his favorability increased. She looked up and narrowed her misty eyes. Her thick eyelashes drooped down, casting a shadow under her pink eyes. It made her look extremely fragile and indifferent. Xiao Hanyang didn't know why, but he looked away and immediately said, "Hang her up and play a game." The lackeys originally planned to follow from a distance. // Chapter 1831. Xia Hanyang frowned. Maybe men like this kind of game. Women like to play games where they could throw a lot of money. He picked up the dart and threw it again. This time he didn't hit the boy but hit the bull's eye. It was a very powerful throw. He couldn't help but feel proud of his skill. He smiled and looked back, wanting to see Wei Wei Bai's expression. But he found that she lowered her head, and a few strands of hair fell on her cheeks. She put her hands on the table, and her eyelashes covered her hazy eyes. Her expression was calm, but indescribably melancholy. It seemed that a gust of wind could blow her away like a feather. Xia Hanyang touched his chin proudly and thought that his skill finally made her afraid. She was so timid. She didn't even dare to raise her head. Then he found that something was wrong. The ugly girl seemed to be looking at her thighs. Then Xia Hanyang looked down and saw her legs wrapped in loose school pants. They were very straight, and her ankles were very white. The rest was covered by clothes and couldn't be seen. Then he finally realized that something was wrong. He suddenly reached out and pressed on Wei Wei Bai's shoulder. Wei Wei Bai looked up in surprise, revealing the book on her thighs. Xia Hanyang stared at the book and couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing?" Wei Wei Bai hesitated and said, "Review the textbook and consolidate my knowledge." Screw your review, textbook. Consolidate knowledge. Did she think that this cruise ship, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars, was used as a classroom? Xia Hanyang looked at her speechlessly. Was she stupid or blind? After Wei Wei Bai finished speaking, she frowned and said, "Student Xia, it's still a little noisy here. Can I go home?" Xia Hanyang. Then he coldly raised his lips. "Go home, of course, but now the ship is at sea, and it will cost a lot of fuel to go back." Wei Wei Bai hesitated, and her eyelashes trembled. She seemed to be thinking about something. "Then, when will you go back?" Xia Hanyang sat on the table with his legs crossed. Behind him was the rotating dart plate. There was a person on the dart plate who was screaming. He suddenly picked up the glass of strawberry juice with a sinister expression. "Drink it." Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly. Then, without saying anything, she took the strawberry juice and finished it in one gulp. Not a single drop was left. The strawberry juice made her lips moist seductively. Xia Hanyang looked at the strawberry juice on her lips and suddenly said, "You have to pay the price if you want to go back. If you make me happy, I'll let you go back to study." Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. "To coax you." Xia Hanyang pointed at the waitresses and said, "Look at how others coax men. I won't let them teach you." This was a blatant humiliation. Xia Hanyang sneered. He refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. He was going to make her cry on her knees. He wanted her to deliberately not give him the test papers and homework so that she could go against him. Xia Baowang childishly thought that if she resisted later, he would pin her on the dartboard. Then he would scare her to death. He wanted her to do her homework, to revise, and to get good grades. The resentment of the underachievers towards the straight, a student almost turned into black gas that seeped out. Wei Wei Bai and the system were still analyzing the law of study gods. In other words, if I don't express my feelings, he won't deduct points? The system said, yes, it's best if you don't dislike it. Of course, it's fine if you don't dislike it, but don't lick it, got it? When Wei Wei Bai was trying to woo people, she was always in a licking mode. Once she had woken up the people, she would torture them one by one. But this plane was different. As long as she suppressed the urge to woo people, her attitude would be cold. Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment, then looked at Xia Hanyang expressionlessly, as if she was hesitating about something. Xia Hanyang looked at her with a playful expression. Although he was smiling, his expression and eyes were unusually cold. He had just picked up a glass of wine, but before he could drink it, Wei Wei Bai suddenly walked over, held his face with both hands, lowered her head, and heavily kissed him. This kiss came quickly and violently. Xia Hanyang's pupil shrank. He looked at her blankly. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. After kissing him hard, disdainful, and perfunctory, her eyes became sharp and clear. "Are you happy?" The wine glass in Xia Hanyang's hand fell to the ground. To facilitate the next reading, you can click on "You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time," if you like. Chapter 1832. His mind was a little sluggish. The part of his lips that had just been kissed had the taste of strawberries and the soft scent of a young girl. There was also another kind of dizzying magic that made his heart speed up involuntarily. His thumping heartbeat was louder than the sound of the engine when he stepped on the accelerator when he was racing. Wei Wei Bai saw his retarded face and narrowed her eyes impatiently. Then she lowered her head again and gently licked his trembling lips. Then her cold eyes met his. She confirmed again seriously. "Is it okay to coax you like this?" It was like a student who was very good at his homework asking his absent-minded teacher. Xiao Hanyang's face suddenly flushed red, as if he was drunk. He suddenly slapped his face hard, pulled off her fingers, and said sullenly, "How dare you? How dare you kiss me?" Wei Wei Bai frowned a little strangely, as if she didn't know why he was angry. She thought for a moment and said, "Was it your first kiss?" This question was asked to a man. It was simply humiliating. Unlike women, if a man was asked about his first kiss or first night, it was very embarrassing. Xiao Hanyang gritted his teeth and said, "It was your first kiss." He couldn't admit it, even if it was his first kiss. Wei Wei Bai nodded calmly. "I was." Xiao Hanyang. These words made him feel very uncomfortable. Wei Wei Bai suddenly tried to withdraw her hand. He held it too tightly, and it was very uncomfortable. Only then did Xiao Hanyang realize that his hand had been holding her fingers tightly all this time. Her fingers were soft, but her temperature was cold. His fingers burned her, making her fingers warm up a little. Xiao Hanyang couldn't help but pinch them. Wei Wei Bai's thin and white fingertips trembled, and she couldn't help saying, "Student Xia, my hand hurts." She didn't do it on purpose. Because of the pain, her cold voice became a little delicate. This was just caused by the girl's voice. It didn't represent her emotions. However, Xiao Hanyang felt itchy in his ear when he heard that she was in pain. He immediately shook off her fingers as if they were burning his hand. He can't even stand this little bit of pain. Look at that person who offended me. Even if I throw him into the sea to feed the sharks, no one will say anything. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be frightened. She lowered her eyes, and her face was pale. Xiao Hanyang could even see her trembling eyelashes when he lowered his head. This reminded him of her pitiful appearance when he went to the classroom to snatch the test papers. Needless to say, her eyes were filled with tears. At least it was better than her ignoring him and being as cold as ice. Xiao Hanyang's breathing was a little disordered. The taste of strawberries on his lips made his brain overstimulated. He couldn't help but reach for the wine cup on the table and casually drink a cup of wine, so that he could calm his racing heartbeat. Then, he suddenly looked around at his lackeys and guests who were watching the show with smiles on their faces. Xiao Hanyang thought that when she kissed him just now, this group of gossipy men had seen it all. He had been drinking, and his head was already dizzy. For a moment, his willful and reckless character came out. He reached out and pinched Wei Wei Bai's cheek. "You're disobedient. Don't blame me for bullying you." He pinched her cheek and found that she was blushing. She seemed to be frowning and feeling very uncomfortable. Xiao Hanyang immediately said, "Let's see if you dare to be so licentious in the future and seduce men in public." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. "This idiot. You're the one who should be coaxed. Now you're saying that I'm licentious. Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it, if you like." Chapter 1833. Wei Wei Bai opened her mouth with difficulty and said vaguely, "Student Xia, can I go home?" Xiao Hanyang glared at her. "Shut up. Did I allow you to speak? All you think about is reviewing your homework. Are you out of your mind? I'll let you sit on a cruise worth hundreds of millions, let you eat and drink well, and even let you watch a good show. Are you touched?" Wei Wei Bai was speechless. "Touching your ass. You're touching an iceberg." If she really dared to do that, she would have smashed his head. Anyway, he didn't seem to use his brain much. In the end, Wei Wei Bai couldn't stand it and continued to be in a stalemate with him. If he continued to pinch her, her face would swell. She could only admit defeat for the time being. "I'm touched." As soon as he heard this, he felt reluctant. Xiao Hanyang, who was already a little drunk, kept asking Wei Wei Bai to obey him. All of a sudden, she said that she was moved and followed his words. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. Then, he felt a surge of pride, which made him a little excited. Xiao Hanyang waved his hand and threw the empty glass away. Go back. Go back. Anyway, the ugly girl had already admitted defeat. Look at her. She looked like she would cry to death if he bullied her again. Although her face was cold, she must be very scared. Xiao Hanyang didn't know that his actions would make people think too much. His heartbeat was still echoing in his ears. It seemed that he couldn't get rid of the aftertaste of his first kiss. Xiao Hanyang suppressed this uncontrollable feeling. Suddenly, he thought of something and frowned. Wei Wei Bai saw him like this and thought that he was going to go crazy again. Sure enough, the next moment, he dragged her and ran. Wei Wei Bai was stuffed into the elevator. The elevator reached the top floor. The sea breeze blew, making Wei Wei Bai a little cold. The cold wind blew her thin clothes up, and her ink-black hair fluttered, revealing her beautiful forehead and her misty eyes. She was not used to combing her bangs. Xiao Hanyang thought that she was distracted and immediately turned her face to face. Look, the sunset. He actually sounded a little excited. Wei Wei Bai smelled the smell of alcohol on his body. Xiao Hanyang was probably drunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so impulsive. She didn't resist and just watched the sunset calmly. The setting sun was like a soft, orange-yellow egg in the sea. The reflection of the sparkling sea gave it a deep and warm feeling. Because he was standing on the boat, he had the illusion that the egg was very close to him. Xiao Hanyang was really drunk. He staggered to the railing. The sea breeze was a little strong, and he was blinded by it. His footsteps were messed up, and he actually fell toward the railing. That kind of distance, that kind of momentum. If he really fell, he would definitely fall. The cruise ship was so high. If he fell, he would probably become a person with cerebral palsy or a vegetative state. Wei Wei Bai immediately rushed over. Although she disliked her target, she couldn't show that she liked him. But there was definitely no problem in saving lives. This was because, according to the law of the god of learning, a top student rescuing a bottom student. It was perfectly justified. Of course, more importantly, the target couldn't die. When Xiao Hanyang hit the railing, he suddenly sobered up. He would fall to his death in this position. His fingers were just about to grab the railing. For him, as long as he grabbed the railing with one hand, he could be saved easily with his arm strength. Well, he grabbed the railing and was about to fall down. A pair of slender arms hugged his thick waist tightly. Chapter 1834. Her whole body was pressed against his broad back. Because she used too much strength, the softest part of her made his whole back hot. He trembled and almost lost his grip on the railing. Wei Wei Bai dragged him back with all her strength. Her breathing was disorderly and her fingers were trembling badly. He was too heavy. Her malnourished little body was almost unable to withstand being taken down by him. Xiao Hanyang was stunned for a moment. He held the railing with all his strength to stabilize his body and then stopped moving. His abdomen was against the railing and his feet were steady. Maybe the wine was still affecting his brain. He actually stopped moving. As long as he turned away from the railing, there would be no danger. But Xiao Hanyang didn't move, letting Bai Weiwei hold on to him. His clothes were thin, and because she was so close to him, her breath hit his clothes and made his skin warm up. Weiwei Bai's voice was trembling because she used too much strength. Xiao Hanyang, hold on. Don't fall. She did not see that he was safe. She thought that he was tottering. Xiao Hanyang suddenly clasped her fingers and turned to look at her. Weiwei Bai saw him turn back and his other hand holding the railing tightly. She knew that he was out of danger. She immediately let go of him and stepped back a few steps. Her breathing was still very unstable. Because she used too much strength, there was a warm blush on her snow-white face, just like the strawberry juice. It had a sweet taste. Xiao Hanyang felt that his heartbeat was even more abnormal. He could not help but take 2 steps forward. Weiwei Bai frowned and stepped back a few steps. Xiao Hanyang slowed down. He suddenly felt that the air was a little sticky, making it difficult for him to breathe. He was about to say something, such as a few words of ridicule. Did he need her to save him? What was the use of her overconfident strength? But when the words came to his mouth, he did not know why he changed his mind. The atmosphere between the two of them was a little dizzy. Weiwei Bai thought that Xiao Hanyang was probably drunk. He He looked at her strangely, but his eyes were burning. This kind of burning sensation was not similar to conquering or bullying. It was more like the first stirring of love. Wei Wei Bai frowned. It was impossible for the favorable impression to be so low, right? Just as he was thinking about this, the system said, "Favorability has increased." Wei Wei Bai asked, "When did it rise?" The system replied, "It increased twice. The first time was when you kissed him. He increased by 5 points. Then, it was time for Wei Wei Bai to save her. He went up another 5. After hearing the system's words, Wei Wei Bai said, "Favorability is 10? What an easy strategy." She didn't do anything. Towards this kind of matter, where favorable impression points fell from the sky, she retreated 3 feet back. Every time it was sweet at the beginning, there would be some terrifying big move waiting for her at the end. Wei Wei Bai looked at Xia Hanyang vigilantly. Seeing her staring at him with burning eyes, Xia Hanyang suddenly has an idea in his dizzy mind. Wait a minute, this ugly girl kissed him, and kissed him twice. And when he was almost in trouble, she actually saved him. She likes him? Xia Hanyang's eyes immediately lit up with the burning desire of a wolf. Wei Wei Bai felt that Xia Hanyang's gaze was poisonous. It was so bright that it could be used as a light bulb. Xia Hanyang was about to say something. The elevator door opened, and a man who looked like an attendant said respectfully, "Young master, the ship has docked." Xia Hanyang's eyes immediately turned cold, and he looked at the attendant gloomily. The attendant was speechless. Then, the attendant silently retreated back into the elevator, pretending that he had never appeared. /T. Chapter 1835. Wei Wei Bai saw that the ship had docked and immediately walked to the elevator. Xia Hanyang followed her. When he saw her long hair swaying as she walked, his mischievous heart jumped. He reached out and pulled the ends of her hair. Bai Wei Wei almost went bald from his tugging. She immediately reached out and pressed her aching scalp. Finally, she couldn't bear this idiot and looked back at him fiercely. "Student Xia, can I go home now?" This sentence was full of murderous intent. Xia Hanyang didn't know why, but his fingers immediately loosened. Then he sneered and said, "Why go home? What delicious food can you make in your worthless home? Can't I even afford to treat you to a decent dinner?" Bai Wei Wei faintly looked at him, cold and chilling. Then she said, "You said I coaxed you, so you let me go home." As soon as she said that, Xia Hanyang instinctively pursed his lips and smelled strawberry. Xia Hanyang immediately said impatiently, "Get out if you want." Damn, others would think that he was begging her to eat. It was good enough that he didn't throw her into the sea to feed the fish. If it weren't for the fact that she saved him, would she dare to be so cold to him? Wei Wei Bai breathed a sigh of relief, then walked to the elevator and immediately said to the attendant, "Can I get my school bag back?" The attendant quickly said, "Yes, I'll help you get it." Xia Hanyang also squeezed into the elevator and stared at the attendant fiercely. The attendant was speechless. Then he silently shrank into the corner, tried to make himself disappear. She finally got her school bag and got off the ship. Just as she was about to leave, a car stopped beside her. The driver poked his head out and told her that Xia Hanyang asked him to send her home. Wei Wei Bai didn't argue and immediately opened the back door and got in. Then she immediately took out the textbook from her school bag and continued to review. After reviewing for 10 minutes, she got 1 point. Xia Hanyang stood on the cruise ship, leaning against the railing. The smell of alcohol had already dissipated. He reached out to support his head and frowned. No one knew what he was thinking. A lackey came over and said, "The driver said to send her back." Xia Hanyang frowned and glared at his henchman. "What does it have to do with me? Do you need to report to me about that clown?" The lackey had a look of understanding on his face, but he still agreed. "That's right, brother Xia. You don't have to worry about such an ugly person." Xia Hanyang was immediately dissatisfied. "Who told you to call her ugly?" "Lackey, have you forgotten what you scolded?" Of course, the lackey's reaction was very fast. He immediately said, "Brother Xia, we saw that your girlfriend likes to eat strawberries, so we asked the waiter to put a bunch of strawberry-flavored desserts in her bag." Xia Hanyang snorted. "That's unnecessary." Then he thought of something else and said, "Is it enough?" Do you have the most expensive, gold-sprinkled signature dessert? Lackey. Yes, 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 we have them all. Xia Hanyang explained stubbornly. If you want to take something, you have to take the most expensive one. Let that poor guy know how generous we are. Lackey. Yes, yes, yes. You're right. After the lackey left, he said to the rest of the lackeys, Brother Xia is probably going to fall in love. Be careful. The rest of the lackeys smiled knowingly. When Wei Wei Bai returned home, she finally realized that her school bag was too heavy. She opened it and saw that it was full of strawberry desserts. There was also a sealed bottle of strawberry juice. She was silent for a moment, took out the desserts, and then finally found the books and exercise books she wanted. Then Wei Wei Bai picked up the pen and continued to work on the exercise books. She could get 1 point for every 20 questions she answered. She had to accumulate more points to avoid punishment. Study hard and improve every day. Quick transmigration system. Male God, come here. Chapter 1836. The system looked at its diligent host and suddenly felt a little lost. Was the host here to date or to learn? But she didn't plan to date. She only cared about her studies. Her affinity with Soar had also increased, so there was nothing wrong with studying. Wei Wei Bai carried her bag to school and ate the strawberry food that was stuffed in her bag yesterday for breakfast. She found that the host's family was too poor. So poor that there was no refrigerator, no TV, no washing machine, no air conditioner, no computer, no induction cooker, but there was a gas stove. She found some money under the system's prompt. It was only a week's living expenses, and it was the most frugal kind, 3 steam buns for 3 meals, and even an egg had to be saved. And this money was saved by the host's own odd jobs. Wei Wei Bai sighed. To be so poor, are you forcing me to commit a crime? The system said, it's okay, you can also do odd jobs. Wei Wei Bai said, how can I survive by handing out flyers on the weekends? In this kind of life, even sanitary napkins had to be saved. She had a stepfather who drank and gambled. Nothing was enough to sell. That troublesome stepfather was still hiding from his debts outside and didn't dare to come back. Wei Wei Bai walked into the classroom while thinking about how to earn living expenses. She had just sat down when the bell rang. The teacher came in with a thick stack of test papers, which were yesterday's test results. Wei Wei Bai was first. Not to mention that the test papers were full marks. They were so clean that the teacher couldn't wait to put them up as model articles. Wei Wei Bai calmly took the test papers and put them in her book without looking at them. Then she picked up her textbook and looked at it carefully. She had accumulated 11 points by doing the questions. 10 points could offset a punishment. The prodigy's secret book test would judge whether she liked to study based on her behavior. If she looked like she liked to study, her points would keep increasing. Wei Wei Bai felt that these points could help her avoid punishment at critical times. Otherwise, she would accidentally show weakness to Xia Hanyang or act like a little white flower. Then the punishment would come crashing down on her head. She would die of indignation. The first class passed smoothly. Wei Wei Bai packed up her textbooks and prepared for the next class. There was also a test for the next class. It was the weekly exam. Anyway, in the 3rd year of high school, other than doing questions, revising the foundation, and consolidating their previous knowledge, they would be taking exams. However, the exam was still the most important, although this was for the sake of Xia Hanyang's private school. But the quality of the school couldn't be too low. Therefore, all the teachers in the school had their own missions. If he could nurture a few students who could enter key universities, he would be able to obtain a generous reward. To the teacher, this was a huge driving force. And in the eyes of the teachers, Wei Wei Bai was the best student who could win an award. As long as Wei Wei Bai didn't offend those arrogant young masters, it wouldn't be a problem for her to get into a top-notch university. The next weekly test came on time, and the teacher handed the test papers to the class representative. The class representative handed out the test papers. Wei Wei Bai calmly picked up the test paper. She was too lazy to look at it again. She casually pulled a piece of paper and put it aside. Then he picked up the pen, and the celestial learning scroll automatically took the test. The pen in her hand, swish, 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 it was natural and smooth. The speed and neatness of the answers on the test It was no different from the standard answers printed by the computer. Wei Wei Bai said, "Cool." It was simply enjoyable to be able to take the test like this. She pretended to slow down. If only she could finish all the answers in 10 minutes. Fast, fast, slash, fast, fast, slash, fast. Chapter 1837. She would be hung up and studied. So she dragged the time until about halfway through the class. She finally couldn't slow down anymore and stopped writing. The draft paper had not been touched at all. Wei Wei Bai felt that the draft paper was too clean, so she casually wrote some calculation formulas on it. Just as she was writing, a slender figure came in from the classroom door. The teacher was originally serious, but when he saw the person, he immediately relaxed. Although he wasn't overly enthusiastic, he definitely felt like he was bathing in the spring breeze. "Student Xia, you're here?" The teacher asked with a smile. Many teachers knew how difficult Xia Hanyang was. But fortunately, he didn't come to school, so the teachers were able to escape. Basically, every teacher who saw Xia Hanyang smiled on the surface, but in their hearts, they were probably cursing him. Xia Hanyang was dressed in a cool, non-mainstream outfit. Black leather pants, a golden waist chain, and a t-shirt with various human heads printed on it. His short black hair was combed high and flamboyant with hair gel. If he wasn't fair enough and handsome enough, his outfit was so ugly that people would want to beat him to death. His legs were very long. Maybe he had done some exercise, because his arms under the short-sleeved t-shirt were sweaty. His slightly bulging muscles were very wild. Xia Hanyang pretended to shoot at the classroom. "Where's the exam?" The teacher said, "Yes, a weekly exam to find out the progress of the students recently." Xia Hanyang's eyes finally swept over the person he was looking for. He looked at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was still writing the draft paper and didn't look up. She was still wearing her old-school uniform, which was too big and unsuitable for her. It was a size too big for her. Her petite and thin body was sitting in the seat, writing with her head down. The sun shone on her back from the other side of the glass. Her white neck and black hair seemed to be glowing. Xia Hanyang was stunned for 3 seconds and suddenly said, "Give me the test paper." The teacher said, "Huh?" Xia Hanyang was going to take the exam? Impossible. Was he here to mess up the school? The teacher didn't dare to say anything. This school had good resources and plenty of opportunities. More importantly, the salary was frighteningly high. There is only one teacher in the city who could achieve wealth and freedom through being a teacher. And with such a high salary, teaching students was actually secondary. The most important thing was that she had to put up with Xia Hanyang, the bad student, making trouble everywhere. Thinking of his high annual salary, the teacher immediately picked up the test paper and handed it to Xia Hanyang. Xia Hanyang didn't look at it. He grabbed the test paper and walked out of the classroom. There was a place for him. It was located right in the middle. In fact, with his height, an ordinary student would have sat at the back. If he sat in the middle, wouldn't he be blocking the view of others? Xia Hanyang walked to Wei Wei Bai and found that everyone was sitting at a separate table. He frowned and suddenly kicked the table next to Wei Wei Bai. "Hey, get up." The students next to him were speechless. Xia Hanyang looked down at him condescendingly. The oppression from his height and the coldness in his eyes were overwhelming. It was enough to make one's legs go soft. "Are you deaf?" The students immediately and quickly picked up their test papers, bags, and textbooks as if they were fleeing for their lives. Then they ran to the back row. She was worried about being bullied by Xia Hanyang. This was a rumor that young Master Xia had bullied someone to death and made them bankrupt. Terrifying rumors that forced people to commit suicide. Therefore, ordinary students would take a detour when they saw Xia Hanyang. Xia Hanyang sat casually on the chair and turned to look at Wei Wei Bai. He found that Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes moved. She finally realized something and looked up. She came back to her senses and glanced at him. Slash. Chapter 1838. There was no emotion in this indifferent glance. There seemed to be broken light in her hazy dark eyes, but they were terrifyingly calm. Then she bowed her head indifferently and continued to write slowly on the draft paper as if she didn't know him. She was afraid that she would be deducted points if she looked at him more. Xia Xuechao's negative points would affect her. She wouldn't get close to Xia Hanyang easily before she had enough points to offset the punishment. After all, Xia Hanyang's score would drop at any time. Once it dropped, she would be in trouble. Xia Hanyang saw that she was so indifferent. He was excited all night and suddenly felt uncomfortable. Pretending not to know him, Xia Hanyang's face turned cold. He raised his lips and smiled gloomily. Then he dragged the table and chair to the middle of the road and put the table next to Wei Wei Bai's table. He connected the two single tables together. Xia Hanyang said sarcastically, "It's an exam. I'll teach you all the questions." Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly. She didn't resist, nor did she reprimand him for his behavior that affected others. Instead, she said in a very soft but steady voice, "No need." Her attitude showed that she looked down on him. Xia Hanyang's face turned gloomy. He grabbed her draft paper. "You've been working on it for so long. You're still working on it when you came in. You can't figure it out, right?" He looked at the draft with a sneer as he spoke. The known function f(x) is equal to xxxxx. M is the solution of the inequality f(x) to xxxxx, etc. The known xxxxx sin x plus cos is equal to Xia Hanyang couldn't understand those xxxxx. He could barely understand the English letters and didn't know what was written on them. Xia Hanyang was speechless. He felt like his brain had been hit. He threw away the draft paper. His IQ would be destroyed if he looked at it more. Wei Wei Bai calmly took the draft paper back and continued to write the formula. This was the foundation of high school revision. Mathematics required a lot of practice to consolidate the knowledge points. Wei Wei Bai raced against time to learn and accumulate points. A college scum was sitting right beside her, waiting for her to be punished at any time. Wei Wei Bai expressed that the strategy was nothing. Studying gave her a sense of security. Xia Hanyang was next to Wei Wei Bai. Her long hair was tied up, and her profile was extremely cold. He stared at her. Where had he been before? Who didn't flatter him? Why didn't this little idiot know anything? What was so fun about writing questions? It was just a matter of getting into a good school. After they graduated, they would still have to work for families like theirs. He looked at her delicate side profile and suddenly felt that he was more mature and understood the rules of society. The clown girl definitely didn't know that she wouldn't be able to get rich even if she got into a good university. A naive little girl who had not yet been ravaged by society. When Xia Hanyang thought of this, the uncomfortable feeling of being neglected finally eased. He pulled a chair closer to Wei Wei Bai and said pretentiously, "Have you finished the questions? Is it difficult?" Wei Wei Bai said calmly, "It's not difficult." He curled his lips. Not difficult? She was still working on the draft after so long. She didn't even write the test paper. It was probably very difficult, but she refused to say it. They were too close. Xia Hanyang suddenly felt that there was a sweet smell on her. It was the sweetness of strawberries. He suddenly leaned over and sniffed Wei Wei Bai's neck. Her long hair was tied up, revealing her white and tender neck that was softer than a lamb's. His heavy breath blew on Wei Wei Bai's fragile and sensitive neck. Slash. Chapter 1839. Wei Wei Bai immediately turned her head and covered her neck. She frowned and said, "What are you doing, Xia Hanyang?" Finally, there was some reaction. Xia Hanyang crossed his arms and held the back of his head. He leaned back and pressed the table behind him. The table tilted due to gravity. He almost squashed the students behind him. Of course, no one dared to say anything. They all endured it silently. Xia Hanyang rarely came to class. He was forced to come to class, so he basically did not come to the classroom and skip classes whenever he could. The only class that he could complete was physical education. The students and teachers in physical education were all bullied by him. That was why it was rare to see him sitting in the classroom and bullying his classmates. He said casually, "You like strawberries?" She had finished all the desserts and fruit juice that he had stuffed in her bag yesterday. Otherwise, she would not have the smell of strawberries on her body. Wei Wei Bai could not help but sniff her sleeves. There was indeed the smell of strawberries. She had accidentally stained it with strawberry jam when she ate it. The jam was too rich and the quality was too good. The smell lasted for so long. She frowned and sniffed her sleeves like a furry little animal. It was so cute. Xiao Hanyang stared at her for a while and suddenly looked away. He actually wanted to touch her head and feed her strawberries. What kind of strange impulse was this? It was also an accident that he came to school today. He was supposed to go racing with someone. Why did he suddenly remember that Bai Weiwei was in class? And his feet took the initiative to walk over. Weiwei Bai looked at the time. It was almost time to hand in the papers. She tidied up her paper and was about to hand in the papers. Xiao Hanyang suddenly threw the papers to Weiwei Bai. Help me with the papers, and I'll treat you to strawberries. And it was a strawberry feast. Weiwei Bai was speechless. Who wants strawberries? Isn't it more direct to give money? The system said, if you can't help, you'll lose points. It was intolerable for a top student to help a bottom student cheat. It was misleading. Bai Weiwei pondered over the law of the study god, and she found a loophole. If I help him with the test papers and teach him at the same time, will I not be deducted marks? The system replied, that's fine. Weiwei Bai immediately took his test paper and looked up at Xiao Hanyang seriously. Xiao Hanyang, I'll teach you if you don't know how to do it. She immediately picked up her pen. Do you see this formula? This is the repetition point, the image and properties of the function. Function f, x, m, m11, m, 2 equals 0. She wrote the answer as she spoke. Xia Shuabu. What is she saying? What am I doing? Where am I? Who am I? Weiwei Bai. It's simple. This was really the basic knowledge of high school. It was not beyond the syllabus at all. Xia Shuabu. Hee. Xiao Hanyang thought that he would stuff the test paper into Weiwei Bai's mouth and feed her. To hell with how easy it was. He felt that these questions were all extraterrestrial. But when he saw Weiwei Bai looking at him seriously, his hazy eyes cleared up. Those black and clean eyes. It was a reflection of his figure. At this moment, she only had eyes for him. Xiao Hanyang's heart thumped against his chest again. His palms began to sweat. He was wearing very little, but he did not know why he was sweating. And her strawberry taste, it was unprecedentedly clear. Her lips moved as if it was delicious. Weiwei Bai finished a question and found that the top student index had risen. Xiao Hanyang's top student index had risen to -20. It was worth celebrating. Bai Weiwei immediately persevered and continued to write the test paper. Then she quietly explained the questions. She wanted to cultivate Xia Shuabu into a top student immediately. Otherwise, they would not be able to properly fall in love. Suddenly, she felt that Xiao Hanyang was too quiet. She could not help but look up and was about to ask if he understood. But she saw Xiao Hanyang's burning eyes. She could not help but frown. Xiao Hanyang. Before she could finish her sentence, Xiao Hanyang suddenly lowered his head and kissed her on the lips. Weiwei Bai, ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15, comma. Chapter 1840. This kiss was so unexpected that even a veteran like Weiwei Bai couldn't come back to her senses for a while. In fact, Xiao Hanyang was also in a daze. He felt that he had suddenly leaned over and wanted to kiss her as if he was possessed. Maybe he just wanted her to stop talking about the questions. Or maybe it was because her lips looked like they were strawberry-flavored. Damn it, he didn't like strawberries. But in the next second, he sucked on her soft and cool lips and felt very comfortable. At this moment, everything in the classroom was far away. Only her soft breathing, soft lips, and the strawberry taste of her body could be heard. His mind was in a daze as he sank into it. Then Weiwei Bai finally came to her senses. This was the sacred place of the exam in public. What the hell are you doing? Sure enough, in the next second, Weiwei Bai heard an explosion in her ears. Disrupting the examination venue will result in one punishment. You could deduct 10 points from the top student points. Bai Weiwei's mind immediately sobered up, and she suddenly pushed him away. She immediately wiped her lips with her hand in disgust and glared at Xiao Hanyang. She had been working on the questions all night, and her points were deducted just like that. After Xiao Hanyang was pushed away, he saw that her face was red. He wasn't much better. His palms were sweaty, and even his ears were red. He didn't feel angry when he saw Wei Wei by wiping her mouth with her hand. It was just that his heart was beating very fast. He even felt that her hand was stained with his saliva. He actually felt that he wanted to do something to cool down his body. The classroom was silent. The teacher and the examinees were speechless. Damn it, they were all sneaking around the field side by side, or carefully sitting next to each other in the grass. If they were even more powerful, they could run into the woods and hold hands like thieves and kiss each other. But during an exam, they were directly kissing in the classroom. This made everyone unable to react for a while. The quick-witted students had already secretly lowered their heads and immediately checked the books to cheat, while others were shocked. The teacher finally reacted. He coughed, and then his voice trembled. These two students, pay attention to your image. If it was another student, he dragged her out and went straight to the office to do some ideological work. On Monday, there will be a meeting to criticize and ask people to write reflections. After all, the exam site was very important. Everyone would do what Xia Hanyang did. There was no need to attend this class. Xia Hanyang was hot. His body was boiling, and the young and strong man's hormones were in the explosive period. He also did some heavy physical exercise every day. This strawberry-flavored kiss made his body explode with heat. It was like a volcano was about to erupt. Even Wei Wei Bai was blushing and glaring at him. Even he was tempted to death. So when the teacher spoke, he said impatiently, "What image? Are you targeting me?" The teacher, as the saying goes, when one is invigilating an exam, the pot will fall from the sky. Xia Hanyang snorted and looked around, only to find that the students in the classroom were looking at him strangely. He sneered, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen someone kiss before?" Wei Wei Bai and the other examinees had never seen such a scene. This was really shameless to the extreme. Wei Wei Bai always thought that Xia Hanyang was low enough, but in the end, he was always lower. She couldn't listen to it anymore. Afraid that she would be deducted points again, she immediately picked up the test paper, got up, and handed it in very quickly. Download the at https://m. Sashu. Com. Chapter 1841. The teacher looked at her with pity, as if he was watching a scene of a bully forcing a girl into prostitution. Xia Hanyang was simply robbing her. Didn't he see student Bai's shocked and frightened expression? Wei Wei Bai was speechless. It was the first time she encountered such a strange strategy. What should she do when she encountered a mentally retarded strategy target that she wanted to kill? Ignore him and study hard. Wei Wei Bai stared at the strange stares of the crowd and walked out of the classroom step by step. She was used to big scenes, but this was the first time she felt pressure. After all, everyone knew that she was with a mentally retarded person. If this happened a few more times, she would also be with a mentally retarded person. Xia Hanyang saw that Wei Wei Bai had handed in her test paper and immediately stood up. The students behind him finally got over the pressure and heaved a sigh of relief. Xia Hanyang grabbed his test paper and threw it to the teacher. "Give me full marks." "All right. Remember to give Wei Wei Bai's test paper full marks too. You can try if you don't want to." Wei Wei Bai, who had not gone far, almost ran into the wall. She had originally gotten full marks on her test paper. She was threatened by Xia Hanyang. When the full marks came out, people thought that she got her marks through the back door. Wei Wei Bai finally said with a headache, "Where did you get this strategy target from? He's worse than a mentally retarded person. This is a pig of a teammate." System, it's random. He didn't know that the male lead would have such childish emotional fragments. The fragments in the past were mostly mental patients. But it didn't matter if they were mentally retarded, blackened, or even half crazy and half rational. They were all extremely intelligent. It was no wonder that the host couldn't adapt to Xia Hanyang's kindergarten-style strategy target. Wei Wei Bai was really afraid of the kindergarten Xia Hanyang. She got full marks on her test paper yesterday and studied seriously. 3 more marks were added. But after deducting, there were only 4 marks left. She was listening in class now because she couldn't see the blackboard or the teacher's face clearly. But because of the character of a genius and the help of the genius secret book, she also had the IQ of an adult so of course she had a great advantage over others in understanding high school questions. As long as he had the right attitude and stayed away from Xia Hanyang, there was basically no problem. Bai Weiwei heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Those arrogant and fast footsteps. It must be Xia Hanyang's. He was the only one who could make such eye-catching footsteps in such a quiet campus during class. Weiwei Bai couldn't help but quicken her pace. She felt as if she would be infected with a virus if he clung on to her. Xia Hanyang followed behind her. At first, he just wanted to walk side by side with Weiwei Bai. But when he saw her quicken her pace, he suddenly thought, was she shy? Xia Hanyang couldn't help touching his ears, which were as red as a girl's. He didn't know what he was feeling, but he felt that it was good to tease Weiwei Bai. This feeling was not bad, and it was different from the feeling he had when he was racing. It was a much softer and deeper feeling. Xia Hanyang couldn't help but touch his lips. It tasted so good. Xia Hanyang knew nothing about relationships. He had seen too many wine and meat deals, but he had never touched it before. After all, when he built the amusement park on the cruise ship, the old master made it clear that he couldn't touch an unclean woman, and he couldn't touch drugs. When the old master was serious, he would still listen to him, so he refused to touch any unclean woman. And he saw too many prostitutes and waiters selling meat. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time, if you like. Chapter 1842. As a result, he had seen too many women outside and felt that they were not clean. But Bai Weiwei wouldn't. He stared at her exposed neck. That touch of white was as dazzling as the clean snow. He narrowed his eyes and followed Weiwei Bai like a wolf. Wherever she went, he would follow. Weiwei Bai suddenly turned into the library. Xia Hanyang followed. The library was very quiet, and it was especially big. There were thousands of books in the library that was a few floors high. When a person entered, they would be lost for a moment. When Xia Hanyang walked in, he found that Weiwei Bai was gone. He looked at the pile of books and immediately frowned. Where was Clown Girl? Weiwei Bai finally got rid of Xia Hanyang. She immediately sighed. I didn't seduce him, nor did I capture him. Has he never seen a woman in 8 lifetimes? She increased her favorability so easily. She just stuck to him so easily. Did she not have the self-esteem of a capture target? She squatted in the deepest part of the library, in the most remote corner of the bookshelf. The system said, maybe it was your learning attitude that moved him. Weiwei Bai said, it's no use being moved, the top student index won't increase. The side mission was too much of scam. An index of 100. A year's time. How could Xia Hanyang's IQ reach that level? The capture strategy and the side mission would probably fail. The system said 10 points can avoid a punishment and can also increase Xia Hanyang's index by 1 point. Weiwei Bai said, in other words, he is now minus 20. I need 1,200 points to complete the side mission. The system glanced at the densely packed set of rules and confirmed with a hum. Weiwei Bai said, 1,200 points, I still need to study hard. After she said that, she immediately took out a study book and sat by the bookshelf to read. In this world, the only mission was to study hard and earn points. Everything else was secondary. The system saw that she was reading seriously, so there should be nothing else. Xia Xuecha was still wandering around the first floor, but he could not see Weiwei Bai even if he walked around for a day. Therefore, the system could play games without worry. What the fuck? There was a new game that had a huge reward. If you won, you would get a year's worth of snacks. You have to win, eh? Host learn earnestly. The system played the game seriously. Xia Xuecha walked around aimlessly. Weiwei Bai saw that it was almost time for the next class. She took a few more glances at the physics formula book and was about to close it. A huge shadow was suddenly cast over her head. Weiwei Bai frowned. She raised her head without warning. Xia Hanyang's face was cold, and his eyes were cold. I'm looking for you. Don't you know? Weiwei Bai, why didn't the system remind him when this guy came? He didn't even have the time to avoid this idiot. Seeing Weiwei Bai's incomparably calm eyes, her face returned to its original pale state. She wasn't shy or flustered at all. He was panting slightly, and his whole body smelled of sweat. He ran quickly from the first floor to the second floor, looking for a person like a cheetah. Even Xia Hanyang had a hard time. When he found the third floor, he actually neglected Wei Wei Bai for the first time, because the place where she was squatting was too remote. Ordinary people couldn't see her at all. When Xia Hanyang was about to climb to the fourth floor, he suddenly remembered. Damn, he could watch the surveillance video. Therefore, he ran directly to the surveillance room, threw the security guard in charge of the surveillance out, and watched the surveillance video alone. /T. Chapter 1843. Wei Wei Bai was always expressionless. She looked at him calmly, although he felt that she must be faking it. But before he got the evidence, he was still not sure. Now he was sure that anyone who saw her action just now would know that she was doing it on purpose. She deliberately threw herself into his arms and deliberately used her stunted body to seduce him. Xia Hanyang blushed and slammed his hand on the bookshelf. More than a dozen books were shaken down by him. He didn't know why he was so excited. He thought that the clown girl actually liked him, but refused to admit it. Even if she was cold and expressionless, she was still so cute. Xia Hanyang didn't know why, but he suddenly wanted to exercise, fight, and smash books. At the end of his excitement, he waved his hand with a bitter face. Damn it, his hand really hurt. But why was he so excited? So many women liked him. Like the clown girl, there was a sea of beautiful women, and other women had good figures. Not like Wei Wei Bai or Little Bean Sprout's body, but it was really soft. The temperature didn't seem to be high, and it was clean and comfortable to hold. Xia Hanyang tried to calm down and then immediately walked out quickly. The bell rang. He had to go to class. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 25. Wei Wei Bai, who had just opened her textbook and was ready to study hard. Damn, what was wrong with Xia Hanyang again? Why did the favorability increase again? Don't increase the favorability first. Increase the top student index first. Then she heard the sound of hurried footsteps. She looked up with a face of despair. Sure enough, she saw the non-mainstream, stupid son of Matt Landlord, Xia Hanyang again. His face was arrogant, and his long legs were more elegant than a model's. He was like a gust of wind. He was going to sit at the table next to Wei Wei Bai, but he saw Wei Wei Bai lowering her head and not looking at him. The white and tender tips of her ears behind her hair seemed to be smeared with honey. His eyes suddenly widened. He suddenly stopped breathing, afraid that Wei Wei Bai would see his excitement. He immediately stood at the table behind Wei Wei Bai, not waiting for Xia Hanyang to say a word. That student immediately cleaned up the table and respectfully gave up his seat. Boss, please sit. Boss, you're awesome. Xia Hanyang sat down on the chair and saw the back of Wei Wei Bai's head. Her hair was very thick and black, as if it was shining. However, it was always tied up properly. The beautiful ends of her hair fell on her thin back. Xia Hanyang narrowed his eyes and rested his chin on his hands, watching her swaying hair. He had never been a quiet person. They were even hyperactive, people who hated silence and couldn't sit down. But for some reason, he looked at the girl in front of him. His heart instantly calmed down. Seeing that Xia Hanyang was not making trouble, the teacher immediately got into the mood and began to teach. All the teachers had been through a lot. As long as Xia Hanyang stopped beating people up and setting fire in class, the teacher could calm down and finish the class. Wei Wei Bai had the secret book of learning gods and didn't need to do anything for the exam, but to earn points for the top student to make up for the bad student Xia Hanyang. She also listened very carefully, because the law had a good learning attitude score. It was scored once a week. When you were lucky, you could get 10 to 20 points. Wei Wei Bai's mind was full of points now. What was dating? It was nothing. Fast download the at https://m. Sashu. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like fast. Chapter 1844. She lowered her head and carefully noted the handwriting, occasionally scribbling something on the paper. Xia Hanyang watched her casually stretch out her white fingers and tuck a strand of long hair behind her ear. That beautiful ear was right in front of his eyes. He pursed his lips and had an impulse to touch her ear. He gently reached out his hand, and just as his fingers were about to touch her ear, She suddenly lowered her head and seemed to be memorizing the questions again. Xiao Hanyang's fingers paused and retracted. It was as if he was afraid of being discovered by her. He found that he was not excited, but afraid of being discovered. This was the first time Xiao Hanyang's heart had been so disobedient. Wei Bai finished writing the key points of a lesson and flipped through the book to review. She did not look behind her to see what Xiao Hanyang was doing. Xiao Hanyang was cutting Wei Bai's hair. It was a handful of her hair that had fallen on his desk. He stared at it for a long time, and for some reason, he took out a Swiss Army knife from his pocket. After throwing the knife away, he could not help but cut her hair. He did not know how childish and wretched his behavior was. He just wanted to cut her hair. He did not know where this impulse came from. But for Xiao Hanyang, he had to act on impulse. He did not know that his behavior was like that of a kindergarten student or a first-grade elementary school kid. He secretly liked a little girl. He bullied her with all his might. After cutting a few strands of hair with great difficulty, he took out a handkerchief and hid the hair inside. Then he put it in his pocket. Bai Weiwei felt that something was strange behind her, so she asked the system. The system nibbled on sunflower seeds. It's okay. The male lead is in a daze. Ignore him. When Bai Weiwei heard this, she threw Xiao Hanyang behind her. She did not need to be afraid of him being in a daze. Finally, the class ended and it was time for lunch. Wei Bai breathed a sigh of relief. It was time to eat. She still had money in her meal card, which was subsidized by the school. After all, she was a key student, but the subsidy was not much. He still needed to add more for himself to eat well. Wei Bai said that she didn't need to eat well as long as she was full. He was not picky and only bought the cheapest food. He did not need to spend his own money to make his meal card last for a semester. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hanyang sat behind him obediently and didn't make a fuss during the whole class. Even the teacher heaved a sigh of relief when the class ended. As if they had just escaped a calamity, all the students and teachers ran away as soon as the bell rang. He ran faster than any other day. Wei Bai also tidied up the desk, then stood up and asked casually, "It's time to eat. Do you want to eat?" These ordinary words would not enter the eyes of the law of learning deity. After all, they could still make small talk. She just couldn't like Xiao Hanyang. She couldn't lick his boots. Even more so, she couldn't show him too much cowardice. Wei Bai also began to test the limits of the side mission. Hearing this, Xiao Hanyang immediately stood up and knocked over the table behind him. "Let's eat. I'm starving." The ugly girl liked him. What else could it be? Look, with a cold face, she was afraid that he would be hungry. Xiao Hanyang had already seen through the woman's tricks. The ugly girl was shy and didn't dare to show it, so she used such a subtle way to seduce him. Xiao Hanyang reached out and was about to put his hand on Wei Bai's shoulder. However, Wei Bai turned around and walked away quickly. His arm missed. So shy, Xiao Hanyang was not annoyed. He chuckled and followed her. Chapter 1845. Wei Bai walked into the cafeteria expressionlessly. Xiao Hanyang was about to follow her when his lackeys finally found him. The lackeys rushed up and separated him from Wei Bai. "Brother Xia, you didn't answer your phone and you're missing. We've been looking for you for so long. There's a horse race in the afternoon. Shall we go? Let's race, drink, and pick up girls at night." Xiao Hanyang saw the person he wanted to see enter the cafeteria. He impatiently pushed the lackeys aside. "You're so annoying. I'm studying hard now. I have to eat in the cafeteria." The lackeys were shocked. What did he mean by studying hard? Eating in the cafeteria? Was this Xiao Hanyang's line? Suddenly, a lackey bumped the person next to him and whispered, "He's in love." They immediately understood and said with a smile, "Then let's eat too." Although they were Xiao Hanyang's lackeys, they were all rich young masters. Therefore, they were more like brothers when they were fooling around. Xiao Hanyang entered the cafeteria carelessly, followed by 3 or 4 lackeys. The cafeteria was very good, but the food was more expensive. Although the school had subsidized the food here was better than the better restaurants outside. So the students thought it was a good deal, even if the food was more expensive. Wei Bai bought 2 steam buns and a bowl of mushroom soup. Vegetarian food. She flipped open the small book, which was filled with all kinds of formulas. She could handle the rest of the courses easily. Mathematics really required a lot of practice and memorization to lay a good foundation. She took a bite of the steam bun and glanced at the formula. Soup could only be drunk if one choked to death. Mushroom soup was similar to meat, which gave people a psychological comfort of eating meat. Bai Weiwei thought as she ate. She had to find a decent worker to work for. If he couldn't feed himself, he wouldn't be able to complete the mission. She would probably be malnourished and die. This world was too busy, so she didn't do the love strategy for the time being. Weiwei Bai planned the next plan. She took a bite of the steam bun and suddenly felt a little quiet around her. She held the steam bun and looked up blankly. She saw Xiao Hanyang and his 4 or 5 followers, just like a group of male models. Their expressions were the same. His eyes were cold, and his eyes were extremely strange. They stared at the steamed bun in her hand. Weiwei Bai frowned. She only had 1 steamed bun left. Why did these people have such expressions? Finally, she tried to ask, "Do you guys want to eat too?" She then pointed at the steamed bun in her hand. They were all men, so if they wanted to eat, they would buy it themselves. Why did he keep staring at her steamed buns? Weiwei Bai relied on this to survive, so she carefully held the steamed bun further away. He was afraid that the steamed buns would be snatched away. He saw her move. The expressions of Xiao Hanyang's followers finally changed. Some of them were shocked, some of them tried to hold back their laughter, and some of them found it inconceivable. In any case, not many of them had a normal expression. Xiao Hanyang was the most abnormal. He reached out and snatched the steam bun from her. Then, she threw into the trash can and said angrily, "What the hell are you eating? Is this for humans?" Weiwei Bai. Isn't she a human? Xiao Hanyang sat directly in front of Weiwei Bai and slammed the table. "Go get your food." 2 of his followers immediately strode to the ante and said coldly, "Get the most expensive, the best, and the most sumptuous food." The ante hit the lid of the pot with a long spoon and shouted, "Line up." Followers, Weiwei Bai stared at her lunch in the trash can. Then, she picked up the mushroom soup. "Forget it, there's no steam bun. I'll just have some soup to fill my stomach." Xiao Hanyang snatched the bowl from her hand. "What dirty water? Don't drink this damn thing." Weiwei Bai looked calm. Then, she said to the system, "I want to kill this guy." "System, calm down, calm down." The host was finally driven to the brink of collapse by the kindergarten male lead. Xiao Hanyang frowned. "Can't you buy something better? Who eats steamed buns these days?" Weiwei Bai looked at him coldly, but didn't say anything. Xiao Hanyang's precious brain finally felt the same way. This clown girl couldn't be poor, right? He suddenly smiled and reached out a finger to lift her chin, meeting her misty eyes. "It's easy to solve if you don't have money. Why don't I support you? // Chapter 1846. Weiwei Bai stared at him blankly. Xiao Hanyang thought she was happy. It was common to have a lover in the circle. So he said without any burden, "I can afford your living expenses and tuition. If you don't want to take the college entrance examination, I can send you abroad." Raising a lover also depended on one's status. After all, it was for the benefit of a businessman. Xiao Hanyang had lived in the business circle since he was young and had come into contact with this kind of thing. So when he got close to Weiwei Bai, he instinctively used the methods of the business circle. He didn't even look down on Weiwei Bai. He did things based on his business instincts. Weiwei Bai liked to go to school, so he didn't instinctively say that he would buy her a car, a house, or clothes. Instead, he used the temptation of going to school to make her succumb to him. He looked at her with burning eyes and lowered his voice like a poisonous snake tempting depravity. Even the top foreign universities can be settled with a few $100,000 of sponsorship. This was the fee for Weiwei Bai to behave normally. If she behaved abnormally, he would donate a few more million to the school, and it would be enough for the principal to personally pick her up. Didn't she like to go to school and study? He could give her anything, so he was qualified to support her. After Xiao Hanyang finished speaking, he couldn't help but reach out his hand. He had long been thinking about her fingers on the table. Those white, tender, and slender fingers were full of the softness of a girl. His unruly action was about to succeed. The two followers who had finished getting the food walked over and put a few plates of food on the table. The bright red dishes and the orange-yellow dishes were all the most expensive food. No matter how expensive the food in the cafeteria was, it was still within the range of normal prices. Xiao Hanyang looked at them. What the hell? He had no appetite. But he couldn't ask someone to deliver food immediately. After all, it would take too long. So he picked up his chopsticks and excitedly picked up a piece of meat, intending to nourish Wei Wei Bai. Her small body was too malnourished. Wei Wei Bai looked at him expressionlessly as if she was looking an idiot. Then, she gently leaned back to avoid touching his flesh. Then she stood up, intending to leave. If it didn't leave now, she would go on a rampage. She hadn't met such a silly target in a long time, so she wasn't used to it. However, as soon as he got up, a few of his lackeys blocked his way, each with their hands in their pockets to show their innocence. Then he blocked the way. Wei Wei Bai was forced to stay at this table and couldn't go anywhere. Xiao Hanyang looked up casually and said, good-naturedly, "We just had dinner. Where are you going?" His calm and unhurried manner was especially sinister. He seemed to know that Wei Wei Bai couldn't get out of here. Wei Wei Bai finally calmed down and sat back down, but she was already thinking about how to adjust her strategy. If they really followed Xiao Hanyang's pace, they wouldn't be able to find a strategy. Don't even think about increasing your academic genius index. Wei Wei Bai was actually not angry. She had experienced too many strange targets. Xiao Hanyang was considered mild. But if she didn't control the pace of the strategy, she would feel uncomfortable. Obviously, Xiao Hanyang's appearance had disrupted her usual strategy. She didn't intend to pursue him from the beginning. She didn't even intend to provoke him. She wanted to increase her academic genius index before she planned her love strategy. However, the rhythm was completely disrupted, so she planned to find her own rhythm. Wei Wei Bai looked at Xiao Hanyang gloomily. Chapter 1847. Xiao Hanyang saw that she had sat back down obediently and immediately said with a smile, "Come on, eat well. By the way, what do you think of my proposal? We can still discuss it." In fact, he was nervous. This was the first time he had talked to a girl about being a sugar daddy. He thought that it was impossible for him to meet the little lover he wanted to keep. However, when he met Wei Wei Bai, his heart was itching. When he went to bed last night, he was so nervous that he tossed and turned. His mind was full of her. Wei Wei Bai looked at him meaningfully, then slowly picked up her chopsticks and began to eat. Eating was not a problem in the rules of being a genius. As long as she expressed disdain in her heart while eating, it was fine. She could accept Xiao Hanyang's kindness, but she had to accept it with a cold and disdainful attitude. This would not trigger the demerit mechanism. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai ate calmly, then spread out a revision notebook, looked up and said seriously, "Student Xia, let's talk about something more important." She put the notebook in the middle of the table, then slowly ate and said, "We are all classmates. You treat me to a meal, so I should return the favor. Let me help you with your homework." After that, she pointed to a formula and said, "This is to determine the parity of a function. The square of x under the root sign plus 1 is greater than the square of x under the root sign f negative x is equal to negative f x." Xia Xueji was speechless. Wei Wei Bai turned another page and said, "This is the simplification and evaluation of logarithms. It is known that triple x is equal to triple x under the root sign, so adding whatever equals." Xia Xueji's smile gradually stiffened and disappeared. Wei Wei Bai ate steadily and explained steadily. She did not cry, make a fuss, be unhappy, or worry. He still behaved like a paralyzed ghost, turning a deaf ear to his sugar daddy. Wei Wei Bai said, "This is the application of the function model. The common function y is equal to bx plus b." Xia Xueji's face gradually showed a desperate expression. "Where's this place? Where's this place? This place is so annoying." Wei Wei Bai was almost done with her food, so she asked Xiao Hanyang seriously, "Student Xia, do you understand?" She looked serious and even a little happy as she said this to him. Because she had imparted high school knowledge to Xia Xueji, his index had risen to -15. That was something worth celebrating. Student was speechless. I don't understand. But seeing Wei Wei Bai's expectant look, Xia Hanyang's face stiffened. In the past, no one would have dared to follow his example and learn such a thing. He pushed people into the shark pool and let them have a taste of what it means to be a shark. But facing Bai Weiwei's eyes that seemed to twinkle with stars, he choked for a moment. Bai Weiwei put down her chopsticks and tidied up her notebook. She got up very naturally and said, "Then see you in class, classmate Xia." Xia Hanyang's brain is a little slow after being fixed by a bunch of functions. However, his hunting instinct was very fast. He reached out and grabbed her slender wrist tightly. Only then did he remember that he hadn't finished talking about keeping her. Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled. She suddenly turned her head and slowly lowered her head. This scene was a little ambiguous. Her lips were almost touching his face. Xia Hanyang's expression was a little stiff. He nervously held his breath. However, Wei Wei Bai didn't kiss him. Instead, she whispered in his ear, "Student Xia, I like boys who are good at studying and have better test scores than me." Chapter 1848. It was a clear and cold voice. That warm breath tickled his ear. "So if you want to support me, you must first study better than me." Her soft voice was flat but seductive. How could one person intertwine two completely different tones so naturally? She gently turned her hand and freed her wrist from his grasp. Then she looked up expressionlessly and walked out with her notes. The sidekick was blocking the aisle. Wei Wei Bai walked in front of the sidekick, but did not stop. The sidekick who was blocking the way frowned. Seeing that Xia Hanyang did not react, he did not dare to let her bump into his arms and could only retreat. Bai Weiwei turned a blind eye to it and walked out straight away. She did not turn back even once. When Xia Hanyang came back to his senses and touched his ear, he hurriedly got up. Study well. It was the first time in his life that he had met such a strange person who liked someone. What's the use of studying well? Can it be eaten or drunk? Xia Hanyang complained, then immediately got up and followed by Wei Wei's footsteps to class. He didn't realize that he had been following by Wei Wei's route the whole time. Anyway, he did what he wanted to do, and it was often a 3-minute passion. Recently, he had been eyeing Wei Wei Bai, but he did not think that he could follow her for long. When he felt that it was not fun anymore, he would not continue to play. But the way she whispered in his ear made it hard for him to breathe. The sidekick immediately followed him. Then, a group of people walked into the classroom. Halfway through, everyone suddenly stopped in their tracks. Under the big tree, in front of the classroom, in the green shadow, the young girl stood gracefully under the shade of the tree. Her pale face had an unhealthy color to it. She was stopped by someone. When Wei Wei Bai saw the boy who stopped her, her first reaction was to ask the system, "Are you here to collect a debt?" The system said, "I don't know him. No information. He's a passerby." Wei Wei Bai calmed down. Anyway, it was fine as long as he wasn't here to collect debts. The boy was so nervous that he was trembling. Finally, he gathered his courage and said, "This is for you." With that, he stuffed the letter in his hand into Wei Wei Bai's hands and turned to run. Wei Wei Bai took the letter and glanced at it. She knew it was a love letter. She didn't expect that she would be able to attract a love letter from a boy with such a lowly appearance. Love letters. They were the sweet memories that were worth reminiscing about in school when he was a teenager. Of course, love letters were nothing to Wei Wei Bai. She picked it up and glanced at it, intending to throw it away. After all, learning was the most important thing, and early love was not allowed. In the end, the love letter in his hand was suddenly snatched away by someone. She suddenly felt a broad chest pressing against her back. Then, a sinister voice rang out, "What the hell?" Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked up at Xia Hanyang. Without waiting for an explanation, the bell rang. When it was time for class, Wei Wei Bai immediately walked to the classroom. As for the love letter, she was going to throw it away anyway. If Xia Hanyang wanted it, she would just give it to him. Seeing that Wei Wei Bai seemed to be running away, it was more likely that she had a guilty conscience. Xia Hanyang's face sank at once. One of the lackeys was more experienced. "It's a love confession letter." Xia Hanyang tore the envelope and took out the love letter inside. "Classmate Bai, I've admired you for a long time. The first time I saw you was when we first entered the school. You wore a brand new uniform and stood on the podium, giving a speech to the new students. At that time, I started to like you. The to read at https://www.sashu.com/ to txt the to read at https://m sashu.com. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.